London.
Every roger, go for deploy.
Stay tuned, everybody in the shuttle program. The crew is go for launch.
Roger, nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
Good afternoon and welcome to our live coverage of the NASA SpaceX Crew 9 mission as it returns to Earth. Dragon Freedom departed the International Space Station at 1:05 a.m. Eastern. That was 10:05 p.m. Pacific time on March 17th for those of us here in California. On board Crew 9 are NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Suni Williams, Butch Wilmore, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Aleksandr Gorbunov. And they are now on their way to the targeted splashdown site off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. My name is Kate Tice, Senior Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX. And joining me today from NASA Communications is Sandra Jones.
Thanks, Kate. It's always such a pleasure to be here. Upon departing the International Space Station, Dragon underwent a sequence of departure burns. The crew then had a rest period and has since kicked off preparations for re-entry, including getting into their spacesuits and successfully performing a leak check. The next phase of the mission is when things will really start to amp up. Dragon has a series of steps to complete before returning Crew 9 home.
That's right. First, Dragon will maneuver to the correct attitude and jettison its trunk, which is the cylindrical, unpressurized lower part of the spacecraft. The trunk is currently connected to the aft or bottom section of Dragon, where the heat shield is located. But in order to expose that heat shield and get the vehicle ready for atmospheric reentry, we're going to jettison that trunk.
From there, the spacecraft will use its forward thrusters to perform a deorbit burn, which will put Dragon on a trajectory to return to Earth. This burn will last about 7.5 minutes once it starts. The deorbit burn uses Draco thrusters on Dragon, primarily the four located on the forward bulkhead, and is executed at the apogee, or the highest point of Earth's current orbit around the Earth. This deorbit burn will alter Dragon's path to ultimately line it up to re-enter Earth's atmosphere and splash down off the coast of Florida. Splashdown today is planned for 2:57 p.m. Pacific or 5:57 p.m. Eastern.
The Crew 9 mission began a little differently than usual, since Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams were already aboard the space station when Nick Hague and Aleksandr Gorbunov arrived in the Crew 9 spacecraft in September. Having arrived as the crew flight test crew for Starliner, Wilmore and Williams were fully incorporated into the space station's Expedition 72 team and began research and other work aboard the station along with the other crew members. Additionally, Williams commanded the orbiting laboratory for much of the expedition.
And after a successful liftoff and separation from Falcon 9, Nick and Alexander made a short flight on board Dragon to the International Space Station in September. Both veterans of long-duration station missions, both Williams and Wilmore conducted spacewalks during their 9 months in space. Having had the capacity to leave the station at any point, had there been some type of emergency, the crew members began packing for their voyage home about a week ago and worked through tasks and shared lessons learned with the newly arrived Crew 10 team, who arrived just a few days ago.
For return operations such as this, NASA and SpaceX closely coordinate with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board the returning spacecraft. Multiple notices are issued to mariners in advance of and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones.
Now, we do want to stress to the public the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous task, and any other boats interfering increases risk to the astronauts in Dragon, the teams working to recover them from the water, and the safety of those that come too close. So, for the safety of the crew and your safety, we recommend you sit back and watch as we'll be bringing you the best possible views of our astronauts' homecoming.
And they will be the best views that you can get. So, let's take a minute to meet our returning crew. U.S. Space Force Colonel Nick Hague is your Crew 9 commander. He was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013. This was his second spaceflight to the International Space Station and third launch overall. He spent 171 days in space with Crew 9 and has a career total of 374 days in space. During his mission, he completed a spacewalk with astronaut Suni Williams. That was his fourth spacewalk, earning him a career total of 25 hours, 56 minutes of spacewalking time. Before Crew 9, Hague previously served as a crew member of Expedition 59 and 60 back in 2019. He flew with Aleksandr Gorbunov and NASA's Christina Cook. So this is his second time sharing the space station with Gorbunov. The Kansas native is a test pilot of a distinguished graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. Nick spent 5 months in Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He voluntarily transferred from the United States Air Force to U.S. Space Force in 2021 and is an active colonel. His wife, Katie, is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel, and they have 2 sons.
NASA astronaut Suni Williams is a mission specialist for Crew 9. This was her third visit to the space station. She originally launched aboard Boeing Starliner spacecraft and arrived at the space station on June 6th. And it looks like we are beginning to get some views inside the spacecraft, overlooking the shoulders of the crew on board Dragon. We'll continue to bring you those views throughout the day and views throughout Splashdown this afternoon rather. But to jump back into a little bit more about Suni, she became an Expedition 71-72 crew member, and she logged 286 days in space on this mission. But she actually has a total of 608 days in space, the second most time in space by a U.S. astronaut. Former NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson ranks first for the U.S. with 675 days in space. She conducted 2 spacewalks and has completed 9 over the course of her career for a total of 62 hours and 6 minutes of spacewalking time. She ranks 4th on the list of cumulative time spacewalking by a female astronaut. And she has flown on 4 different spacecraft types, including the Space Shuttle, Soyuz, Starliner, and now Dragon. Previously, she served on Expedition 14 and 15 in 2006 and 2007, and again with Expedition 32 and 33 in 2012. She's a retired U.S. Navy captain and is a proud graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy.
NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore is also serving as a mission specialist today. This is his third spaceflight and, just like Suni, logged 286 days in space. He conducted 1 spacewalk and completed 5 over the course of his career, earning him a total spacewalking time of 21 hours, 2 minutes. He's flown on 4 different spacecraft types throughout his career: the Space Shuttle, Soyuz, Starliner, and now Dragon. Previously, the Mount Juliet, Tennessee native served on STS-129 in 2009 and Expedition 41 and 42 from 2014 to 2015. Wilmore is also a retired captain in the U.S. Navy.
And Aleksandr Gorbunov is a 3rd mission specialist serving on today's mission. Crew 9 was his very first spaceflight to the space station, earning him a total of 171 days in space over the course of his career. Gorbunov, along with Nick Hague, saw the arrival of 4 visiting vehicles and saw the departure of 4 as well. The duo orbited the Earth more than 2,700 times during their mission. Before his cosmonaut selection in 2018, Gorbunov worked as an engineer for a rocket space corporation and helped support cargo spacecraft launches from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan.
To prepare for upcoming events, Dragon is currently doing a couple of things autonomously. First, it's isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator. This system is what will help keep the internal temperature of Dragon very comfortable for Nick, Suni, Butch, and Aleksandr during the re-entry phase. Dragon is also initiating separation of the claw mechanism, which will terminate data, power, and fluid connections between the spacecraft and the trunk in preparation for that trunk separation that I mentioned earlier. Now, as we saw before, we are hoping to get more views inside of the Dragon capsule. We will bring those, of course. We want to see more of our 4 crew members. But now a bit more of the Dragon Freedom capsule. It has flown on several missions for NASA. It first launched April 27th, 2022. to the International Space Station on NASA's SpaceX Crew 4 mission. It was subsequently used for 2 private spaceflight missions to the space station for Axiom Space, Axiom Mission 2 in May 2023, and Axiom Mission 3 in January of 2024. And of course, Crew 9 launched last year, is September 28th. So, yeah, a little bit about the Dragon Freedom capsule. Here, a view that we have once again between the shoulders of Commander Nick Hague, who is on the left-hand side of your screen there, and Mission Specialist Aleksandr Gorbunov there on the right.
That's right, Kate. And the next major milestone that we're looking ahead towards this afternoon is claw separation. We're targeting that claw separation at 2:05 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon, so less than 10 minutes from now. Continuing to get some views inside Dragon Freedom. To the far left there is NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore. And as you can see, the crew is suited up in their space suits. They are suited up in what we call dynamic phases of flight. So when they launch, when they dock, when they undock, when they return back for splashdown. We might hear some call outs on the loops about putting their visors down. That will happen just prior to deorbit burn. And you'll hear us pause when some of those communications happen. That's because we want to make sure that we are relaying the best information to you all, and so that you hear it as well. So if you do hear us pause, that is what we're doing. You also see they have their on there, and I know the gloves are pretty unique on the Dragon spacesuits, right? They're custom created?
Yes. The spacesuit overall is custom fit for each astronaut. These gloves enable usage of the touchscreen panels that they have in front of them. We can't see it from this view, but that view we saw earlier between Aleksandr Gorbunov and Nick Hague, that is a touchscreen. It allows the crew to monitor everything that Dragon is doing, along with those tablets that they have there on their legs. So yeah, the spacesuit itself is intended to act as a mini spaceship, if you will, as once the visors are closed, it is able to maintain a pressure in the unlikely event of a depressurization event for Dragon. So there we can see those screens I was talking about. So there in the center, we've got the location tracker, as well as on the left-hand side, it's mapping out the operations that Dragon is executing. The crew has to remain well informed of all these things that Dragon is doing autonomously. That basically means that Dragon is flying itself. The crew has the ability to gain control of the capsule if necessary, but the capsule is essentially going to bring itself home. But of course, in order to be familiar with
Freedom, SpaceX, deorbit sequence start in 5 minutes.
Freedom capsule.
And so we did hear that call out for the deorbit sequence start to begin here in 5 minutes. That call from the ground came from the core, or Crew Operations Resource Engineer here in Hawthorne, Mission Control just behind us. And that went up to Commander Nick Hague. He's going to be doing the majority of the communications during the flight downhill today through Splashdown, and they'll be communicating with the core all along the way. Now, we did mention that they are flying on Crew Dragon Freedom. The naming of spacecraft has gone all the way back to the very beginning of this human spaceflight program. This is a nod to Alan Shepard naming his spacecraft Freedom 7 during the Mercury program. And so the crew that first flew up on Freedom a few years ago had the opportunity to name this Dragon, and they named it Freedom. That was Crew 4 that was the first flyers on this spacecraft. It's also flown for Axiom Mission 2 and 3, and then, of course, today for Crew 9 as well.
Yeah, actually, fun fact about this particular capsule, of those 4 missions that Sandra just mentioned, we have seen daytime splashdowns for 2 of those. Today will mark the third daytime splashdown. So there's something lucky about this particular capsule that gets daytime splashdowns. Nighttime is great because we can see even more clearly the capsule streaking through, but I personally love the daylight views because we really get even better views of the recovery team operations during that phase of the mission.
Yes, absolutely. And if you follow along with our missions, you'll know that sometimes weather is a watch item when it comes to undocking and splashdown. We do splashdown in the water, so we want to ensure that parameters like wave heights and wind speeds and precipitation, lightning, all of that is looking good for the crew and the safety of those recovery personnel. And today the weather is just pristine. We got off of space station on the very first attempt. So I'm joking around and saying that it was because it was St. Patrick's Day and we got really lucky with the weather.
I wouldn't disagree with that. Speaking of weather, we will be hearing from Core probably around 2:20-ish. Typically, before we enter the period of loss of signal or LOS, we will hear an entry briefing from the Core, the Crew Operations Resource Engineer, and they will deliver important information like updated anticipated splashdown and loss of signal times to the crew, as well as the wave height and wind speed. So we'll be standing by to listen in on those. Like I said, that will happen shortly after. Typically after trunk separation. I can't quite remember if it's before or after deorbit burn. It must be before. But in any case, we'll be hearing all of that coming from Core. In fact, that individual is seated there in the room on your screen. That is SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California. That room is located just over our shoulders. And that is where Dragon operators are standing by on console, monitoring the progress of Dragon as it continues its way home. It's been, at the point of splashdown, it'll be about 17 hours since Dragon undocked from the International Space Station. The team there in mission control, there are multiple teams, in fact, and they cycle through shifts to ensure that everybody gets the required rest and sleep periods, just like the astronauts on board. And that Crew Operations and Resource Engineer is seated there in the room, and that, like Sandra said, is the primary voice that we'll be hearing communicate from the SpaceX team to the crew on board.
That's right. And so it looks like we're about 3 minutes or so from the claw separation portion of today's flight. The claw is a portion on the spacecraft that holds the trunk to Dragon. Following claw separation, we're going to jettison or remove that trunk because it's no longer needed. The trunk has solar arrays on it that provides power to the Dragon spacecraft. But now that we're beginning the reentry process, we need to go ahead and jettison that trunk and able to expose the heat shield, which is really going to do the heavy lifting as Crew 9 re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. They come in at 17,500 miles per hour, so they really need to ensure that that heat shield absorbs that heat. And there's
Deorbit sequence start.
And so we did just get communications there that the deorbit sequence start has begun. So here in just a couple minutes from now, we expect to hear information or a call back about the claw separation having begun. And again, that kicks off that trunk separation portion that I was discussing to remove that, expose the heat shield, and then eventually we'll have the deorbit burn. And we'll continue to walk you through all of these milestones as we approach them ahead of our splashdown at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon, off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida.
Yeah, we're very excited to bring the Crew 9 crew home. Sandra, we were talking about the trunk separation. That trunk is on a trajectory that will re-enter in the atmosphere and break up upon that re-entry. The heat shield itself is one of my favorite parts of the Dragon capsule. It is the workhorse of the re-entry phase. It will work to protect the Dragon capsule and the crew members on board during the re-entry phase as the temperatures outside of the capsule build up to, I believe, about 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit in excess of. And meanwhile, the interior of Dragon stays a very comfortable temperature. That heat shield does a lot of the work, and we'll see that plasma build up on the exterior of the capsule. As a result of the plasma that builds up, we will lose communications with the crew. This is known as loss of signal, or LOS. This is roughly a 10-minute period on average, even less than. I believe today it is probably about 6 or 7 minutes long. It kind of depends on the mission, and it happens for every Dragon capsule that re-enters the atmosphere. Due to that plasma buildup, we're not able to communicate or command the capsule, so we stand by while we wait to regain communication after we pass through that period of loss of signal and get what's known as AOS, or acquisition of signal.
Continuing to stand by for claw separation, and then we'll look towards trunk separation. It'll be just about a minute or so after that. That happens pretty rapidly in succession. Some of our milestones will take a little bit longer throughout the day. For example, we will have a deorbit burn after that will take about 7.5 minutes and helps get Dragon set up in the right trajectory to splash down in the Gulf off the coast of Florida. So continuing to stand by for claw separation.
Nominal trunk jettison.
All right.
Freedom copies.
Great news there. That trunk has been jettisoned from the Dragon capsule. So the claw was separated. That's the mechanism that connects the telemetry and power between the Dragon capsule and the trunk. In order to expose the heat shield underneath Dragon, we had to jettison that trunk, and so we just got confirmation that that has happened. So that is great news. Basically means that telemetry is looking good and that the nitrox system is primed for cabin and suit cooling, and the heat shield, like I said, is now exposed and ready for atmospheric reentry. The trunk served its purpose by gathering energy from the sun through its solar cells and converting that to battery power. Since we separated the trunk, we can't generate any more new power, but we really don't need to since we're coming home and Dragon has enough battery power already stored. Now, up next, the final steps that Dragon will perform prior to reentry: the slew, or the maneuver to deorbit burn attitude, and then the deorbit burn itself. This deorbit burn is the last time that the forward Dracos, which are the 4 thrusters located on top of the spacecraft under the nose cone, it's the last time that they will ignite. The deorbit burn will place Dragon on a precise trajectory to return to the splashdown zone off the coast of Florida, off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida, and that will last about 7.5 minutes once it starts.
And so deorbit burn is targeted for 2:11 p.m. Central Time, so about 2 minutes from now. As we mentioned, it's going to last about 7.5 minutes, again, helping to get Dragon into the precise trajectory to ensure that splashdown occurs in the area that was calculated and where the recovery team is already in place, ready to support splashdown operations today. The recovery vessel Megan is the ship that is going to be utilized today, and we also have what is called fast boats that go out first to check the spacecraft and make sure everything is looking good before the recovery vessel Megan approaches. So that whole recovery process takes about an hour, I would say, from the time the crew splashes down to the time they're on the boat and the crew gets out of the capsule. And we'll continue to bring you live coverage through every step of the way today as Crew 9 returns home.
Indeed. Now, let's take a little bit of a closer look at Dragon. One of the great things about being close to the space station is that we can use space station cameras to look at Dragon. But now that Dragon is on its way home, we don't have those external cameras. So here's an animation of what the capsule looks like. We've got the pressurized section, the capsule on the top, and the trunk, or the unpressurized section, on the bottom. That's where those solar panels that we manufacture in-house are located, soaking up the energy from the sun and turning it into power for the capsule. At the very top of the capsule is the nose cone. That is where the Dracos, the forward Dracos, are located. That nose cone is currently open, not closed like we saw in that animation. Once we get through the final maneuverings for the re-entry phase, we will close the nose cone capsule just before Dragon begins its atmospheric entry to protect that forward hatch there located along with those forward Dracos. So Go ahead.
Oh, that's right. I was going to mention that the nose cone does open shortly after launch, and it remains open the entire time that Dragon is docked to the International Space Station. So as an example for this particular spacecraft, Freedom, since September when it docked to the International Space Station, remains open that entire time, and here shortly it will close for the very first time since September.
So quick recap of what Dragon has done in recent history here. We basically began preparations for re-entry known as the Deorbit sequence. So Dragon released the trunk. As we said before, we separated the claw, we released the trunk. It next will slew to the deorbit burn attitude. Slew basically meaning maneuver, so it will position itself correctly to execute that deorbit burn. We want the heat shield side to be facing forward, or first, if you will. We want that to be the leading edge of the Dragon capsule, as that heat shield is meant to basically be an ablative material for the heat that it will incur. Once we complete that deorbit burn attitude slew, we will initiate the deorbit burn itself. That will last for several minutes, expecting that to be to start here any moment now, actually, and then it will go until about 2:18 p.m. Pacific time or 5:18 p.m. Eastern time.
And I did hear confirmation that deorbit burn is underway. As we mentioned, it's about a 7.5-minute burn. So within the last 10 minutes, Dragon has jettisoned its trunk and initiated the deorbit burn just seconds ago. As mentioned earlier, for those operations, NASA and SpaceX closely coordinate with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board the returning spacecraft. Multiple notices are issued to the mariners in advance of and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the spacecraft, the splashdown zones. So we do want to stress to the public the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering increases the risk to not only the astronauts in Dragon, but the teams working to recover them from the water and the safety of those that may come too close. So for the safety of the crew, which you see there on your screen, your safety, we recommend you sit back and watch as we'll continue to bring you the best possible views of our astronauts' homecoming.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, this deorbit burn is the last time that we will utilize our 4 forward Draco thrusters. Forward basically meaning at the top of the Dragon capsule. Dragon Freedom has not yet entered the Earth's atmosphere. This deorbit burn is what will line the vehicle up and put it on its final trajectory to the landing site right off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. So basically, it is the last burn that the Dragon spacecraft executes and is what really locks it in for that precise landing. As you can see on your screen right now, Nick, Suni, Butch, and Aleksandr are using their screens to keep tabs on the burn duration, the Draco firings, and trajectory details such as entry angle, spacecraft perigee, and how much distance remains until deorbit burn termination. As I mentioned earlier, Dragon is flying itself. So all the crew has to do is stay strapped into their seats and keep tabs on things. Although I must say, if I had one of those window seats, it would be pretty difficult to restrain myself. Now, with Nick, Suni, Butch, and Aleksandr ready to deorbit and splash down back on Earth, they will be heading to one of 8 targeted sites supported by SpaceX and NASA. All of these sites are located off the coast of Florida, either in the Gulf of America or the Atlantic Ocean. Spreading the supported sites across multiple locations helps maximize the return opportunities for this mission and future crews, lowering the chance that we'll have to wave off due to bad weather. For those of you following along, you'll know that today's splashdown marks our final Dragon recovery on the East Coast. After 6 great years of successful recovery operations off the East Coast, we'll be moving all Dragon recovery operations back to the West Coast.
And as always, NASA and SpaceX jointly select our splashdown location. And for today, the prime recovery site is off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. The selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital trajectory or path that it follows, what landing sites are available and have favorable weather, how much free flight capability Dragon has for the trip home, and the sleep schedules for the returning crew members, as well as, of course, the big one, the weather.
We'll start with calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for re-entry. The time from undock to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39. Getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure the crew is properly rested for dynamic operations, preventing us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them, of course. Trajectory and ballistic experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up Dragon with the 7 landing zones and split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities.
Dragon uses its Draco thrusters after leaving station to execute a series of altitude-lowering maneuvers and to line up with the selected primary site. It can also change to different alternative sites while in a free flight if sudden weather moves in that we may need to avoid. So, as we mentioned, weather is something we're constantly looking at, making the final call to proceed about 2.5 hours before the crew undocks. So for the Crew 9 return, we looked at a number of weather items. Some of the obvious ones are no rain or a chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew inside Dragon and the recovery teams in the water. And we're also looking for wind speeds to be less than 15 feet per second or about 10 miles per hour, and relatively calm seas so that we can safely execute recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly Nick, Suni, Butch, and Aleksandr back to Florida. Once Dragon began flying today, we had a number of additional checkpoints to either proceed towards the primary site, head to the alternate, or select a new zone based on real-time weather data. These checks happened all the way up until we were in the final hours before the deorbit burn, which has just about a minute or so left in it. And this is the last burn in the trip home that commits Dragon to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere.
Now, we are currently waiting to conclude the deorbit burn. We've got less than a minute until that finishes. We will expect to hear a call out for nominal burn, which will confirm completion of that deorbit burn for Dragon Freedom. We can see images there from the touchscreen display panels that the crew utilizes in flight. We can see the visualization of exactly which one of the 4 forward Draco thrusters are firing. That's why you have kind of like a strobe effect there.
And if you're just joining us, you are looking at live views of the Dragon Freedom. On your left is Commander of Crew 9, Nick Hague. To his right is Roscosmos cosmonaut Aleksandr Gorbunov, and also in Gorbunov, that is Aleksandr Gorbunov. And then also in the capsule today is NASA astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore. We are awaiting confirmation that their deorbit burn is complete, which is the last burn that's going to help set them up on a trajectory to Splashdown off the coast of Florida.
Deorbit burn complete. Performance nominal. Nose cone closure initiated.
Freedom copies.
All right, excellent news there. We heard the words we were looking for, nominal burn. So that means that deorbit burn was successful and nominal, meaning as expected. And we're now beginning to close the nose cone in preparation for atmospheric reentry.
So in the background, Dragon is currently inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete the deorbit burn, ensuring it's safe to latch the nose cone shut for re-entry. Also, the vehicle has initiated the nitrox suit purge, which will help keep Nick, Suni, Butch, and Aleksandr cool and comfortable during re-entry, which is coming up in about 20 minutes from now. At this point, the nose cone is closing and protecting the forward hatch for re-entry, and the crew are using their screens to continue to monitor the locking of the nose cone, which is done by a set of hooks. And as we mentioned earlier, that nose cone has remained open since September, so this is the first time it's closing in a few months.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Now, we will be expecting, as I mentioned before, an entry brief from SpaceX Core. Again, that's the crew operations resource engineer who is seated in that room that you see there on your screen. That entry brief will provide updated times for anticipated splashdown as well as the loss of signal or period of LOS. And that briefing will also give us information such as wind speed and wave height at the expected splashdown location. But all in all, everything has been great today. All events have been executed on time as expected, and we are looking forward to a splashdown of the Crew 9 crew at about 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time or 2:57 p.m. Pacific Time. Between now and then, things are going to start moving quite quickly. In fact, if anything, this will have seemed like the slower part of the reentry phase. We're going to go through, like I said, that period of loss of signal or LOS. That period is a few minutes long where we are unable to communicate or command the capsule due to the plasma that builds up on the exterior of the capsule. That period, like I said, lasts for a couple minutes. You will start to hear SpaceX Core hail the Crew 9 crew a little bit earlier than expected because we, in the past, have actually regained communications a couple minutes earlier than initially anticipated. So we'll go through that period of loss of signal, that entry period, that specifically when the Dragon spacecraft is re-entering through the atmosphere. Approximately at about 18,000 feet when the capsule is traveling at 350 miles per hour. We will see our first views of parachutes for the day. It's one of my favorite moments of return sequences is when we get to see the drogue parachutes. We'll see the drogues come out. Those drogues will help slow the vehicle down to about 119 miles per hour. And then that is when the main parachutes will come out from the Dragon spacecraft and then ultimately end in splashdown.
And we are hearing confirmation that the nose cone is closed and everything was nominal or as expected with that closure. So as we begin the second half of entry, Dragon is now beginning to inject cooled nitrox into the air being delivered to the spacesuits worn by Nick, Suni, Butch, and Aleksandr. Again, this is what will allow the crew to remain comfortable while external temperatures reach 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit as they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. So the heat shield is pointing forward, leading Dragon to the landing site.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the heat shield, Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of PICA 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. The first-gen PICA was initially developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system.
SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop PICA X, which was the second-generation product used on all Dragon 1 cargo resupply service missions that resupplied the International Space Station on 20 missions. PICA 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo with enhanced structural and thermal capabilities that allowed the heat shield to be even more effective in the way that it utilized the ability to make that heat ablevate as it goes through the Earth's atmosphere.
The remainder of Dragon is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection which is lighter weight versus PICA and protects the underlying composite structure during reentry to ensure the structural capabilities are maintained.
While Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,000 degrees during peak reentry conditions, the characteristics of the thermal protection system coupled with the environmental control and life support system in the pressurized interior will ensure that Nick, Suni, Butch, and Aleksandr stay cool and comfortable during all phases of reentry through Splashdown.
Now, if you've just recently joined us, we hope to regain views of our crew members inside Dragon Freedom. But we don't have those available at the moment due to ground station coverage. So we will bring those back to you as soon as we can. Now, after Dragon Freedom has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, a series of parachutes will deploy to slow the crew's descent. First will be the 2 drogue parachutes, followed by the 4 main parachutes, and those will guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since it launched back in September. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the spacecraft detect that they're at the right speed and altitude.
Vehicle velocity at drogue deploy is approximately 350 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 18,000 feet. Now, when the vehicle velocity at main deploy is approximately 119 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 6,500 feet. When Dragon splashes down in the water, the vehicle velocity will be about 16 miles per hour, so you can really see how those parachutes help to slow down the crew inside the capsule. The highest G-load the crew is expected to experience today is about 3 to 5 Gs.
Yeah, when you think about really fun roller coasters, they're about in that range. So I'm sure that our crew on board will be well equipped to experience those Gs. It's nothing for them. They go through much more intense training.
And so we are continuing to make our way through a number of milestones today. We did have trunk separation.
Freedom, SpaceX. Nose cone is secure for entry.
Freedom copies.
All right, great news there. That tells us that the final physical configuration change for Dragon is complete. We have closed that nose cone. This is the last physical change that Dragon undergoes prior to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. It's important that that nose cone is completely closed because underneath it is not only where the 4 forward Draco thrusters are located, but it's also because that is where the forward hatch is located. That is the hatch that is utilized for the crew to ingress and egress from the station while it is docked on board. And since our capsules are flight proven and we reuse them on future space flights, we want to make sure that all of the integrity of that hardware remains intact. So that nose cone is successfully closed, and we're going to start moving pretty quickly here. As I mentioned before, we'll go through loss of signal. We'll get that signal back several minutes later, and then we'll see the parachute action.
Yep, and then that's all ahead of Splashdown off the coast of Florida. We're targeting Tallahassee as our splashdown zone today at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. Now, you did mention the call to the crew. They'll do some additional calculations following that burn and potentially let us know if that splashdown time has changed at all. But right now, we are continuing to target 2:57 p.m. And you can see there on your screen a path of where Dragon will be re-entering today. So if you are in the southern tip of Mexico, you might have the opportunity to see Dragon. Because it's a daytime splashdown, you probably won't have too great of views, but potentially you'll have the opportunity to get a glimpse of it there.
Once again, Dragon operators, they're monitoring the progress of Dragon through this re-entry phase. That is SpaceX Mission Control, located here in Hawthorne, California. That is also where the crew operations and resource engineer is seated. That person is the voice that we have heard multiple times and will continue to hear as the primary point of contact to the crew on board Dragon Freedom. We will also hear the voice of Commander Nick Hague. Basically, after we hear the Corps communicate something, we will hear Nick Hague indicate that they copy, that they heard the message well, some sort of recognition that the message was received.
And if you joined us yesterday for our coverage during the undocking, we were communicating through something that's called a big loop. We do that when we're in integrated operations with the International
Freedom, SpaceX, for entry sequence. Report when ready to copy.
Ready to copy.
All right, I've got some updated times for you. Our comm blackout start time is 2144. Our comm blackout end time is 2151, and our splashdown time is the same per your displays, 2157.
Okay. Understand comm blackout start 2144, stop 2151, splashdown per display.
That's a good readback. And with that, please report when tablets are secured behind the elastic bands, restraints are tight, and visors are down.
And copy, welcome.
And with that communication from the Corps or Crew Operations Resource Engineer here in Hawthorne to Commander Nick Hague of Crew Dragon Freedom, we did hear that the loss of signal period is still at 2:44 p.m. Pacific, but we had a 1-minute adjustment to the acquisition of signal. That's going to now be at 2:51 p.m. Pacific time. However, our splashdown time remains the same at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida.
So all good news there as Dragon continues to make its way home with the Crew 9 crew. As we've mentioned before, we are splashing down on the Gulf Coast. We have ability to splash down on either side of Florida, but the location site just outside of Tallahassee, Florida is the site that was selected today due to best recovery conditions. And as Sandra mentioned before, weather is always a watch item, but everything is looking great for that particular recovery location. So I'm sure once we start getting views from the recovery vessel, I have a feeling it's going to be a pretty beautiful afternoon.
And we did mention that, of course, this is a daylight splashdown, so we should be getting some great views. We do have a couple of spacecraft called the WB-57, which are high-altitude planes that NASA utilizes during splashdown operations. Those are en route and going to be tracking the capsule as it makes its way through the atmosphere and should be providing some good views for us. Kate and I were just chatting about how we haven't had a daytime splashdown in a little while, so we're looking forward to the views along with you.
Yeah. Nighttime views are also great because we can see that capsule streaking through the night sky quite brightly. So like Sandra, you said earlier, daylight will be a little bit less bright, but we will definitely be able to see the SpaceX recovery team operations much clearer. I could also imagine it's probably a little bit easier for the team themselves to do their work in daytime than at nighttime. We'll see them rush in really quickly with a couple of fast boats as they begin the initial safety checks and sweeps of the Dragon capsule while also retrieving the parachutes from the surface of the ocean. The recovery vessel, the main recovery vessel, will continue to make its way closer to the Dragon capsule. It is stationed a couple miles away from the actual recovery location, the splashdown location, for obvious safety purposes. So it takes a little while for that vessel to make its way over, but once it's closer, we'll have even better views of those recovery operations.
And you may be wondering why sometimes we splash down in the daytime versus the nighttime. And believe me, we would all love for these operations to happen during regular daytime working hours. But unfortunately, orbital mechanics just doesn't quite work out that way. So it has to deal with the location of the International Space Station, as well as where the splashdown zone is on Earth and that trajectory, as well as the phasing. So as we mentioned earlier, sometimes we have phasing as short as 6 hours, sometimes in excess of 30 plus hours. It just depends on where the targeted area is that the capsule is going to splash down. So today's phasing has been 17 hours since undocking occurred at 10:05 p.m. Pacific yesterday evening for us here in Hawthorne. Early wee hours for folks on the East Coast and other areas of the United States.
Yeah, but regardless of whether it's daytime or nighttime, the SpaceX recovery team has trained and practiced and rehearsed for it all. So regardless of daylight, they are really efficient with those operations. And but like you said, Sandra, it has been a minute since we have seen a daytime splashdown on a NASA SpaceX crew mission. The last daytime recovery was on Crew 4, which was the debut flight for the capsule flying today, the spacecraft known as Dragon Freedom. And so, yeah, kind of a fun fact there in terms of the timing of that daylight splashdowns. Once again, standing by for more communication with the crew. The next event that we have coming up is the start of that period known as loss of signal. That is the period still expected at 2:44 p.m. Pacific time. This lasts for several minutes while the capsule is making its way through the Earth's atmosphere, the heat shield located at the bottom of the capsule, really doing all the work at that point in time in terms of using the atmosphere to slow the capsule down from its orbital speeds of 17,500 miles per hour.
Our tablets are secure, restraints are tightened, visors down. We are configured for entry.
Freedom, I copied. Tablets are secured, restraints are tight, and visors down.
All right, great news there in terms of continuing to make progress. That back and forth communication we heard was just letting Core know that per their instructions, Crew 9 has now put away everything that was necessary in order to begin the re-entry, including those tablets that were located on their legs. Those are now stowed away. They've tightened that safety harness that we see there, and the visors are now down. So with all that being said, let's take a minute to meet our returning crew. U.S. Space Force Colonel Nick Hague is your Crew 9 commander. He was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013. This was his second spaceflight to the International Space Station and third launch overall. He spent 171 days in space with Crew 9 and has a career total of 374 days in space. During his mission, he completed a spacewalk with astronaut Suni Williams. That was his fourth spacewalk, earning him a career total of 25 hours, 56 minutes of spacewalking time. Before Crew 9, Hague previously served as a crew member of Expedition 59 and 60 back in 2019. He flew with Aleksandr Ovchinin and NASA's Christina Cook. So this is his second time sharing the space station with Ovchinin. The Kansas native is a test pilot and distinguished graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. Nick spent 5 months in Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He voluntarily transferred from the United States Air Force to U.S. Space Force in 2021 and is an active colonel. His wife, Katie, is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel, and they have 2 sons.
NASA astronaut Suni Williams is a mission specialist for Crew 9. This was her third visit to the International Space Station. She originally launched aboard Boeing Starliner spacecraft and arrived at the space station on June 6th. Following the agency's decision to return Starliner uncrewed, she became an Expedition 71 and 72 crew member, where she logged 286 days in space on this mission. But Suni has a total of 608 days in space, the second most time in space by a U.S. astronaut.
5 minutes until predicted comm blackout. We'll see you on the other side at 21:51.
21:51. Talk to you soon.
And with that call out from the crew operations resource engineer to Commander Nick Hague, letting them know that everything is looking good ahead of the loss of signal period. We will see the crew on the other side of the loss of signal period at 2:51 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. Continuing on about Suni Williams, who has a total of 608 days in space, the second most time in space by a U.S. astronaut. Former NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson actually ranks first for the U.S. with 675 days in space. Suni conducted 2 spacewalks and has completed 9 over the course of her career for a total of 62 hours, 6 minutes of spacewalking time. She ranks 4th on the list of cumulative time spacewalking by a female astronaut, and she has flown on 4 different spacecraft types, including the Space Shuttle, Soyuz, Starliner, and now Dragon. Previously, she served on Expedition 14 and 15 in 2006 and 2007, and again with Expedition 32 and 33 in 2012. She's a retired U.S. Navy captain and is a proud graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and was the first astronaut to run a marathon in space.
Pretty awesome stuff. Now, NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore is also serving as a mission specialist today. This is his 3rd spaceflight and, just like Suni, logged 286 days in space. He conducted 1 spacewalk and completed 5 over the course of his career, earning him a total spacewalking time of 21 hours and 2 minutes. He's flown on 4 different spacecraft types throughout his career: the Space Shuttle, Soyuz, Starliner, and now Dragon. Previously, the Mount Juliet, Tennessee native served on STS-129 in 2009 and Expedition 41 and 42 from 2014 to 2015. Wilmore is also a retired captain in the U.S. Navy.
Next up is Aleksandr Gorbunov, who is a 3rd mission specialist serving on today's mission. Crew 9 was his first space flight to the space station, earning him a total of 171 days in space over the course of his career. Gorbunov, along with Nick Hague, saw the arrival of 4 visiting vehicles and saw the departure of 4 as well. The duo orbited the Earth more than 2,700 times since September. Before his cosmonaut selection in 2018, Gorbunov worked as an engineer for a rocket space corporation and helped support cargo spacecraft launches from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. So if you are just joining us, we are continuing to bring you live coverage of Crew 9's return to Earth following their mission aboard the International Space Station, where they completed science and research investigations. We are targeting Splashdown off the coast of Florida at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time. The next major milestone that we'll look ahead towards is what we call loss of signal, or LOS, when we won't have communications with the crew because they will be re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. And during this process, there is plasma that builds up around that heat shield, so we are not able to communicate with the crew, but we are anticipating to regain communications with the crew at a short time from now at 2:51 p.m. Pacific time today.
As we said before, everything continues to look good for the return of the Crew 9 team. We are about to go into that period of loss of signal. Once we get views of the crew inside the capsule, once again, we will be sure to bring those to you. But that period of time is when plasma is building up on the exterior of the capsule, generating heat in excess of 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So we are unable to communicate or command the spacecraft at that time. And that includes, unfortunately, video feeds as well. So as soon as we get the views back inside Dragon, we will bring those to you. But until then, we are going to stand by and continue to monitor the progress of Dragon. Like Sandra just said, we are anticipating the blackout period to begin at 2:51 p.m. Pacific time, 5:51 p.m. Eastern time. This will last for several minutes. It's not super exact, even though we are predicting acquisition of signal, or AOS, to come back at 5:51 p.m. Eastern time. In the past, we have regained communication sometimes a little bit earlier than that, so we'll probably start to hear Core begin to hail Crew Dragon a minute or two prior to that anticipated acquisition of signal. But right now, Nick, Suni, Butch, and Aleksandr are seated in their seats inside Dragon Freedom. Their visors are down, and they have put away or stored the tablets they had located on their upper leg to monitor Dragon's progress. Now they will be utilizing the touchscreen displays where the current operation and future operations will be displayed as they are able to monitor Dragon's progress continually. As I said before, Dragon is autonomous, meaning it is flying itself. So the crew stands by and monitors, and those touchscreen displays are what will be allowing them to do so and prepare for events such as parachute deploy.
And while on board the International Space Station, Nick, Suni, Butch, and Aleksandr contributed to over 900 hours of science and research investigations, which is really the key purpose of the International Space Station. Now, the International Space Station is celebrating a major milestone this year where they will be celebrating 25 years of continuous human presence in November. So if you're younger than 25 years, you've never known a day where there hasn't been a human living and working aboard the International Space Station, contributing to key science and research investigations that impact our lives here on Earth. There's research being done on Parkinson's, on osteoporosis, on cancer research, and a variety of other studies. Additionally, the microgravity laboratory provides a jumping off point for us as we venture back to the moon and onto Mars through longer duration space flights. One such example that the crew worked on during this mission was an alternative exercise device. In microgravity, the crew has to exercise for about 2 hours a day because they're not having the effects of gravity on their body. So to prevent bone and muscle loss, we counteract that with 2 hours of exercise per day. On board the International Space Station, they have 3 ways in which they can exercise. They have a bike, they have a treadmill, and they have a similar to a weightlifting machine that counteracts the microgravity environment. But a particular experiment that this crew tested out was a combination of all 3 of those in one smaller device. And this is really critical as we continue on to the moon, Mars, and beyond, because space is really important in spacecraft. So if we have something smaller that the crew might be able to utilize, that can potentially help us venture out even further into the solar system. So science is really the name of the game when it comes to the International Space Station. Some of the other science highlights that took place during this increment that are particularly interesting to me was we had the first wooden satellite that was deployed. This is a study to see if other materials might be more resourceful or renewable in space. So I'm really excited to see the results of that one as well. Additionally, we had a couple of spacewalks that took place to not only provide maintenance to the International Space Station, but also where we swabbed the outside of the space station near vents to see if any microbes that we all have microbes on us, to see if any of those could survive in the harsh environment of space, which again is very important for us to know and understand as we continue to the moon, Mars, and beyond.
Very exciting stuff. Now, at this point, we have now entered the communications blackout period for the Dragon spacecraft. This lasts approximately 7 minutes due to plasma formation around the spacecraft itself. During this time, no vehicle telemetry is received by mission control or the recovery team, and no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communication is possible. But as a reminder, Dragon is designed to fly itself. During re-entry, the vehicle will be slowing down from orbital velocity, which is approximately 17,500 miles per hour. The top temperature that Dragon will experience upon re-entry is 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. This blackout period, as I said before, we expect it to last about 7 minutes today, concluding at 5:51 p.m. Eastern Time or 2:51 p.m. Pacific Time. We right there have our first view of Dragon Freedom coming home to Earth.
And that view is from the WB-57, which is one of NASA's high-altitude planes that is tracking. Now, because of the way that this camera is configured, it does look like it is dark, but it is indeed
Exciting moment for American space travel. The 9-month space saga for NASA astronauts Butch, Wilmore, and Suni Williams is officially coming to an end. Right now, Williams and Wilmore are on board a SpaceX capsule that will soon re-enter the atmosphere. Just minutes from now, the capsule is set to splash down off the Gulf Coast of Florida, back here on Earth after what was one of the most unusual and closely watched chapters in American space travel. Never before has a 10-day test flight turned into a 9-month-long mission in space. Williams and Wilmore became household names as the first crew to take the Boeing Starliner to the International Space Station before it returned to Earth without them due to technical issues. But today, after more than 280 days in orbit, Williams and Wilmore are finally coming home. We want to go to our friend Tom Costello right now, who covers space for us. Tom, we're looking at an image. We assume that's the capsule coming down. But there's also been a loss of signal that I understand was planned for.
Just now, they've reconnected with them. So they now have reestablished signal and comms. That is normal. It happens when they are at maximum heat. A total of 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit is the maximum heat, and that's the plasma buildup you see right there, the glow in the sky. That's the plasma buildup around the spaceship as it re-enters the atmosphere, screaming into the atmosphere, Lester, at 17,500 miles per hour, and now begins the process as the air gets thicker and thicker and denser, that slows down the capsule, and then they're able to finally deploy the chutes. At about 18,000 feet up, they'll deploy 2 drogue chutes, if you will, and then that will keep that ship moving from about 350 miles per hour down to about 119 miles per hour, and that's when they deploy 4 of the main chutes. But they are now very much on target for a landing in the Gulf, right off of the coast of Tallahassee, and the ships are on site, ready to immediately move into the capsule and ensure that it is safe and the astronauts are safe. Everything right now, completely normal. There's the astronauts. A reminder, if I could, Lester, that you've got not just Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, you've got the Crew 9 commander is Nick Hague and the cosmonaut Aleksandr Gorbunov also on board as they are now just minutes away from splashing down.
And Tom, let me ask you this. The whole plan for this mission was for them to go up and down on that Boeing Starliner. Obviously, that not happening. But does that mean that this crew, at least that Butch and Suni, are not necessarily trained up to this particular spacecraft? Or is that even necessary? Is this more of an automated ride home?
You're 100% right. That's been the challenge because Butch and Suni trained to go up and come back on Boeing Starliner, not a SpaceX ship, a Dragon. And now they're coming along for the ride home without really having trained. They had to train actually while they were in the station. NASA had to send them up special spacesuits because their Boeing spacesuits would not work in a SpaceX ship. Look at that.
Yeah, let me interrupt you here just a second. This is the best image we've had now of the capsule. There go. That's a drogue chute I'm looking at.
There you go. That's right. The 2 sets of parachutes are now starting. 2 drogue chutes right there. 18,000 feet while it's moving at about 350 miles per hour. Beautiful. Right on the money.
Excited as Dragon Freedom continues.
Jose Hernandez is with me, a former NASA astronaut. Jose, as we look at this picture, this looks like old school NASA, like back to the Gemini and Mercury days, coming down in the ocean under a parachute.
It does, doesn't it? And originally, I think SpaceX wanted to land on ground with having retrojets, but they abandoned that as being too expensive, so they went back to the water.
Okay, we're going to listen in here for a moment now as the spaceship makes the final moments of its descent.
Per hour when it splashes down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida, here at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. And there we go.
We have visual on 4 healthy mains.
That view was from inside.
Copy.
Okay, just to be clear, that's the main chute that is open right now. You heard the applause. That's a really good thing that this spacecraft is now safely under the parachutes on its proper descent profile to the water.
4 beautiful, healthy mains. Now awaiting visuals of Splashdown. We'll start to hear Commander Nick Hague.
Copy, 1,000.
As we heard right there, Commander Nick Hague will be calling out the altitude of the Dragon capsule from here on out. Landing in water is simpler and provides more margin against unlikely parachute issues. can see those parachutes continuing to slow the Dragon capsule down.
And if you're just joining us, you're looking at
800 meters.
a live view of Crew 9, just minutes away from splashing down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Splashdown 2 minutes from now at 2:57 p.m. Pacific. We do have 4 healthy mains really doing the job there. Just breathtaking views of a calm, glass-like ocean off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Crew 9 just minutes away from splashing down.
This is really such an incredible shot. That
Copy,
was
600.
That was a live view from our recovery vessel, Megan, which is stationed a couple miles away from the splashdown site. We can see the crew there using their restraints as resting places for their arms. They were just in space moments ago, so their arms were able to float freely.
400 meters.
This is a gorgeous bluebird day here that we have for the splashdown of Crew 9. It's incredible to think that the Dragon capsule just minutes ago was going over 17,000 miles per hour, and now gently coasting to a soft splashdown.
200.
Copy, 200 meters. Brace for splashdown.
As you can see there on your screen, continuing to monitor progress of the Dragon spacecraft. And we're going to stand by for splashdown, located in the Gulf of America, off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida.
And splashdown. Crew 9 back on Earth.
Well, you see it with your own eyes. That spacecraft now safely in the water there. You can see the main chutes now settling into the water. The spacecraft, SpaceX Crew 9 return, as it's being called. 4 astronauts and 3 astronauts and a cosmonaut on board. And they will soon be surrounded by vessels and safely lifted aboard another vessel for the return home. Tom Costello watching with us. Tom, everything going as expected so far?
Absolutely perfect. And what you're going to soon see are 2 fast boats very quickly approaching the ship. And these 2 fast boats, they have 2 different jobs. One of them is to make sure that the ship itself, the spaceship, is safe and secure. They want to make sure that there isn't any propellant vapor or vapors that might pose a risk. And then the second fast boat crew is going to come in and pick up those parachutes that you see in the water there. Ultimately, once they make sure that the ship is safe, then you're going to see the big mothership called Megan. The ship will come in. They will attach a crane, a cable to the Dragon spaceship and pull it out of the water and then pull it right up onto the deck of the ship. So unlike the old Apollo days where you would see the divers come and get the astronauts out of the ship and put them in a rubber dinghy, not anymore. Now they literally pull the entire ship out, put it on the deck, and immediately the astronauts, all 4 of them, will be met by not only SpaceX and NASA crew members, but also a medical team for a very quick on-scene evaluation.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. Let me bring in Eileen Collins, former NASA astronaut. Ms. Collins, thank you so much for joining us. The commentator there was mentioning a moment ago, just minutes ago, this space vessel was traveling at 17,000 miles an hour. The people on board were in a weightless environment, and suddenly everything just seems to change on a dime. What's that like?
Aleksandr Gorbunov. They're back on Earth.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, on the return home, they heat up to almost 3,500 degrees on the outside. There's a plasma that forms around the spacecraft, and that's why they need a heat shield. And the other thing they felt coming back was a little bit over 4 Gs. And, you know, what's a G? A G is a unit of gravity. And to explain that, if let's say you weigh 100 pounds on Earth, if you could stand on a weight scale coming back, it would show 400 pounds. That much, I want to say the G-force that they go through coming home. They also went through a lot of shaking around as the jets fire to hold the attitude. Probably biggest jolt comes when that those airs come out. Oh, they got a big jet in the second one they there. Let me tell you, they are very happy right now. They're not worried about the rocky ride home. I'm sure they're happy to be back.
Yeah, we're hearing from NASA. It'll be about 30 minutes for the rescue vehicle to move into place to retrieve them from the water, but the capsule seems to be floating as it's intended to, giving them a safe place for the time being while they await that rescue recovery vehicle to bring them on board and take them back towards shore. Jose Hernandez, former NASA astronaut, remains with us. I appreciated those shots from inside during the final moments of the descent. No one seemed to be doing anything. They were at that point, after a really busy time in space for months, suddenly they were just passengers.
Yes, at that time, they're basically, gravity is just doing the work, bringing them home, and the automated system is keeping it in the correct profile as it comes down and splashes down.
This is a question for the layman out there, myself included. Is it a nerve-wracking moment for whether you're on a space shuttle or in a capsule like this, when you're hurling toward Earth and things are heating up literally? Is it frightening?
Not really, because you don't feel the heat from the inside. You're at cabin temperature. You do see some glow, orange glow, as you're coming in the atmosphere. But and then you feel, of course, the bumpy ride. But I'll tell you, the much more exciting is the blast off, because that one's only 8.5-minute trip, and you go from 0 to 17,500 miles an hour during the blast off.
Well, there's a reason they call them brave astronauts, because it is not for the faint-hearted. I want to go to Tom Costello again. Tom, we mentioned that the rescue recovery vehicle would be a while, but there are, that's not to say there aren't vessels in the water right now surrounding this.
That's right. These are the fast boats that I mentioned earlier. And look at the team that is closest now to the ship. And what they're doing right now is using meters, if you will, to look for any presence of a propellant vapor that could pose a risk, right? That could be a hazard to the recovery teams that are responding, but also to the astronauts on board. This is all normal. Nothing's unusual here. And this is a drone shot. What an amazing shot, right? Right out of a drone to see what's happening right there. Bottom line is the ship has done exactly what it's supposed to do. And now look at the top. The top there, you see the other fast boat moving in towards the parachutes. They want to recover those chutes for obvious reasons, environmental reasons. I actually don't know if they reused the chutes, but certainly you want to recover the chutes from the water. And then you're going to eventually see the big ship come in. Megan is the mothership. And as I mentioned, she will, or they will, then attach a wrench and a cable to this vessel, to the Dragon spaceship, and pull it out of the water. So this entire process, until it's actually on the deck of the ship, about an hour-long process, depending on sea conditions. But look at that. The water is could not be better, right? Blue sky day and really flat water.
And we're going to continue to watch this, Tom, but let's, if we can, just take a moment here and walk us back, how we got here, how these two of the members of this who just came down now, but Butch and Suni, how they became household names. They went up testing the Boeing Starliner capsule. Yeah. They get up there and things start to go wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. And of course, it was back on June 5th. Now, think of everything you've done since June 5th, right? And these astronauts have been up there in space. Don't say stuck. NASA doesn't like that. Now, I'll explain why. But the bottom line is that NASA was not comfortable with the Boeing Starliner to bring them home. Why? It developed a number of problems. Helium leaks, engine thruster problems. You may recall last summer we did this story day after day after day as NASA and Boeing were trying to evaluate how serious was the problem with Starliner. Boeing was convinced it was safe, it could come home. NASA was not convinced. NASA remains haunted by the various, astronauts who've lost their lives, including on Columbia, lost in reentry. NASA said, we're not going to do this. We don't feel comfortable with it. So Starliner came home empty, as you may recall. But that meant that Butch and Suni had to stay on the space station. And Crew 9 then launched. And instead of launching with 4 astronauts, Crew 9 came up with 2 due in September so that Butch and Suni could join Crew 9. A normal 6-month rotation on the station, right? So as a result, Butch and Suni, who've been there since June, now had to begin a 6-month, actually 6-month plus rotation on the station, doing experiments and helping to run the station. By the way, Suni actually became the commander of the station. And in the meantime, they had to plan for the return of Crew 9, which you're seeing right there. And it was led by Commander Nick Hague and then also a cosmonaut on board, Aleksandr Gorbunov. So they have been there ever since. And as you mentioned earlier, they had to train they had to train Butch and Suni exactly how to be a SpaceX astronaut because they were used to being a Boeing astronaut. Different spaceship, different commands, controls, different, everything was different. They had to do all of that while the spaceship was docked to the station and while they're doing their day jobs, taking care of the station. So this whole process, why did it take so long? It costs hundreds of millions of dollars to launch a mission up to the station. And NASA really felt like, first of all, it wasn't safe to bring them back on Starliner. Second of all, there was no reason why these veteran NASA astronauts and Navy veterans couldn't have their tour extended, like many Navy families will know that all too common phenomenon, but stay on station, do their tour on station, and then come back with Crew 9 once they learned all of that there is to know about how Crew 9 operates. So there you have it. And here we are finally now, 9+ months later, 286 days total in space. They have seen, Lester, listen to this stat. I looked up and did the math. They have seen 4,500 sunrises and sunsets as they have traveled 121 million miles.
It is remarkable. We saw in one of the shots just a moment ago, a rescue diver or a rescue person was actually scaling the capsule as it floated there, appeared to be looking in. I assume there's a porthole or something there, appeared to be examining or looking inside the spacecraft. I think we're all certainly, Tom and Jose, we're all certainly gratified to see them, safe right now. But it looks to me like what's happening right here is also a little dicey.
It is. It is. When I landed in Tierra Freeman with the space shuttle, and I was up there 14 days. I remember how miserable I was readjusting to 1G as I sat there waiting to be extracted. I could only imagine these guys being up there 9 months, and now they're bebopping in the ocean.
They're going to need some help getting out.
So they're going to need a little bit of help, and it is disconcerting that they wait so long. I think a whole half hour before they're extracted.
I know you spent 14 days in space on your mission. What is the recovery time to be able to walk straight and to do some basic things?
Yeah, well, 14 days is not too bad, so you don't suffer much muscular atrophy, weakening of your muscles, but you do have problems with your balance system, and it takes 3 or 4 days to adjust. Now, these guys have been up there for 9 months, Suni and Butch, and they're going to need intensive physical therapy. They're going to have to re-strengthen their leg muscles, regain the bone density mass that they lose. They lose about 1% a month, and obviously gain their balance. So they have about 3-4 months of intensive physical therapy coming their way.
Eileen Collins rejoins us here. We spoke a few moments ago with Tom Costello about the decision to not let the crew go back on the Boeing Starliner. There were still some questions about some issues they had on that. Looking back, was that a wise decision?
I agree 100% with that decision. I was actually following what was going on with the NASA engineers. There were many people saying, don't take a chance to bring those astronauts back, because the concern was with the jets that would be doing the deorbit burn. And, that it's a test vehicle, that Boeing Starliner, and it was the first time they had flown astronauts. They were expecting some problems, but that one was serious enough that with the naysayers, NASA decided to go with the more, I want to say, safe option, and that was to bring them home on the Starliner, which honestly has been flying for 4 years now. The Starliner, we have a lot more confidence because there's more time on it. And, I think that Boeing Starliner will get fixed and it'll get flying again someday. Can't tell you when, but I think it'll be flying again, because NASA needs both of those spacecraft going to and from the space station.
All right, Eileen, thanks. We'll continue to look at several cameras in place now around this, what we'll call the recovery site, the splashdown occurring just a little while ago safely. We have every indication that everything is okay on board. This is the larger rescue vehicle where they will hoist the capsule aboard, welcome the astronauts and a cosmonaut on board. And then the business of getting them home. They're going to be under some medical evaluation for a while before they can at least go home and be with their families. But you can imagine the last few days, we saw a story yesterday. The last few days have been probably a mix of emotions. What's the bet, Jose? Do you think they're really itching to get right back up?
Oh, I think right now, I think they're itching to get reunited with their family and catch up over lost time. Because imagine, from the professional perspective, these guys are built, military, and they can handle a 9-month deployment. But from the psychological point of view, an 8-day trip turned into a 9-month ordeal for them, and they missed a mini milestone. So they have a lot of catching up with their family. They're going to go through the physical therapy, and as soon as they're confirmed to be 100%, I guarantee you they're both going to be the first ones to raise their hand and say, "Put me in, coach."
Is this a good moment for NASA and SpaceX? The fact that they figured out a way to work around this issue, not necessarily an elegant solution, but everyone is safe and the mission was completed.
Yes, you got to take the conservative approach because the risks are just too high. I mean, how much value do you put on human life just to prove a point? I think NASA did the right thing. I agree with Eileen in the sense that we have to make sure we keep our astronauts safe, and this was the right call.
Beautiful picture showing what a calm sea that these astronauts have landed in. You can see the various rescue vehicles that are surrounding the site right now. As Tom mentioned, they wanted to check the air, literally the air around the capsule, to make sure there were no fumes that might be dangerous to divers or rescuers here on the scene. I believe that larger, I'll ask Tom, that larger boat, that's the main rescue vessel?
Yeah, that's right. And again, the mothership there, and the nickname is Megan. And I will just tell you that they've got a medical team standing by right there on that ship. They will do a quick evaluation on that ship right there, Lester. And then ultimately, look on the top of that ship. You're going to see there's a helipad on top, right? They will bring a chopper in, land on the top of that ship. They're going to take these astronauts and one cosmonaut over to the shore, over to Florida. When they land, there's a plane already gassed up and ready for them. They will do what's described to me as baseline medical tests right there on the runway in Florida. They're going to get readings on these astronauts immediately, right? Everything from pulse, EKG, they may take some blood gases, everything like that. That establishes the baseline now that they're safe and they're sound and they're on terra firma. But as soon as that's done, they're getting in that plane and they're flying straight to Houston. They will land at Ellington Field in Houston, which is, NASA uses that every day. And guess who might be waiting there for them? Their families will be waiting there, as well as NASA leadership waiting to greet them. They're going to go into a quarantine again in their crew quarters in Houston and go through several days of medical evaluation and testing, and but they'll have their families with them or nearby, and what a homecoming. By the way, Lester, it's dinner time. And can you imagine what they're craving after 9 months on the station? I'm thinking tacos and pizza right now.
That sounds good to me. What a tremendous shot this is. What an important day for space travel, and as the NASA and SpaceX and others in this endeavor continue to look forward as the next walls to climb. And certainly this is a big one, met with the adversity of the problems with the Boeing Spaceliner, Starliner, and then being able to adapt and make sure that these folks could get their way home, albeit a late arrival, certainly longer than your average travel delay, but one they have overcome. This is, Tom, you and I both have had chances to speak to members of this crew along the way. I spoke to Suni Williams, and I think we were all looking for clues of, are they getting a little disgruntled, getting a little cranky, as many of us would be under these circumstances. I didn't catch an inch of it. They seem to embrace that this is part of what they do. This is what they signed up for, a job that sometimes isn't going to go exactly as the mission parameters called for.
And listen, I mean, even if you're a veteran Navy officer, as these two are, and you're used to deployments being extended, that doesn't mean you can't, close the door and gripe for a minute, right? I mean, because it is upsetting their lives. As you heard from Butch, he's got, 2 daughters, one of whom is a senior in high school. He's missing her senior year. Hopefully he's back for her prom, right? He's got another daughter who's in college. And he's very close to his family and his wife and his community. And Suni talks about missing her husband and missing her dogs. Notice one of the first things she talks about is how much she misses her dogs. So, and her mom is also there in Needham, Massachusetts right now watching this live. But you're right. They have always put on a very professional, happy face, excited about the challenge, and insisting they are professional astronauts. They signed up for this. And this is the way it goes, and they will accept it and move on. So, but I'm sure that in their quiet moments, they may have, complained a little bit to themselves or maybe even to each other. That's to be expected.
It's okay. All right, Tom, thanks. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCnews.com, and a full wrap-up in just a few minutes for those of you in the East on NBC Nightly News. I'm Lester Holt. Thank you for watching, everyone, and good day.
Oh, yeah, Sandra, this view is absolutely unbeatable. So just to kind of finish off what I was saying.
We are back here on NBC News Now, where you have just watched that picture-perfect splashdown off the coast of Florida for that SpaceX Dragon capsule. You see it floating there in the Gulf, containing 4 astronauts, 3 astronauts, 1 cosmonaut, including, of course, Butch, Wilmore, and Suni Williams. Those astronauts who went up for a 10-day mission to the International Space Station were there for nearly 10 months. And look at some of these dramatic pictures. You can see that diver scaling the top of the capsule there, those 2 smaller rescue boats, and then the main ship, the main boat right there. It's going to lift that capsule out of the water. We are going to bring every second to you live right here on NBC News. And here with us is correspondent Marissa Parra, along with Dr. Emily Rice, along with Nicole Stott as well, and others. Marissa, I'll go to you. This went about as well as could be expected, right?
Hallie, whoever directed this movie that we're watching deserves an award because it's been cinematic in every single way. And again, especially when you think about the very beginning of all of this, Starliner, the launch initially that we saw, you and I were live on the air last June. And then, of course, every step of the way, this has been something that so many people have become invested in for one reason or another. But so many people now watching this very moment, Butch and Suni have become household names. Hallie, the amount of times that I've covered space launches, I've actually never covered the return. This is not something that we're typically watching and following this closely, but these two have become household names. Everything is going exactly on target. Of course, we're waiting to hear updates, but everything we're seeing has been on time. Their splashdown timed out to the minute, as we expect from rocket engineers, right? This is what we expected, 5:57 on the dot. And then right now, as we expected as well, they were making sure the premises, the area was secure. Oh my gosh, that's a dolphin. Like I said, this couldn't be more cinematic, Hallie. Those are dolphins. I can't make this up. Those are dolphins that are playing in the water next to the Dragon capsule with astronauts inside. I hope that they can see this as well as we can. But those are engineers and folks out there making sure that they can get the hatch opened and bring them back into our atmosphere. It's been a while for Butch and Suni, over 9 months. And then, of course, as we've talked about, there is a series of events that will happen afterwards. They will get quickly checked once they are brought on board on the vessel that is waiting for them. And then, of course, they will be taken to Houston Johnson Space Center, and they will reunite with their families and then get longer, more in-depth medical evaluation. Because again, we're talking about the effects of microgravity on the body. It affects your blood pressure. It affects where your fluids are going because, of course, the human body is adapted to being in gravity. So fluids, when they're floating, they're not necessarily regulated as well as they are down to Earth. And then there's even impacts on the spine. Mike Massimino was telling me that, the spine lengthens when you're not in gravity. The spine will lengthen, so it takes time for the body to resume as normal down here. So they're going to be watched carefully and hopefully treated to a very nice meal. Mike Massimino said his first craving was pizza, so I'm sure they're craving something other than space food right now, Hallie.
You can bet on that. Marissa, stand by for a second as we are watching the astronauts, the SpaceX and NASA crew members, the dolphin that have appeared there in the Gulf off the coast of Florida. Nicole, let me go to you as somebody who has been to and returned from space. What's going through the minds of these folks right now, of Butch and Suni and the commander?
I think they're really excited. I think they're probably, I mean, I just have this memory of course, I was in a space shuttle, so being on the runway at Kennedy Space Center and thinking, as I was waiting for the hatch to open, like, oh my gosh, an hour ago I was in space.
Yeah.
And now I'm back here on Earth. And just how incredible that is that we can do something like this and really just waiting for that hatch to open and that waft of fresh air to come in. And I'm sure they will love it. Hopefully they'll catch a glimpse of those dolphins out there too. That's what I live in Florida for.
No kidding. Terry Virts is joining us as well, former NASA astronaut and International Space Station commander, along with Jose Hernandez, also a former NASA astronaut and engineer as well. Terry, I'll go to you. Walk us through what we can expect to see in the next 5 minutes here, because you can see that rescue boat pulling the capsule closer essentially to that main boat, if you will, the mother boat that's going to essentially hook the capsule up and then lift it straight out of the water.
When you talk to me, look at me, that way I know.
Yeah, it's going to be a delicate operation. You mentioned a little while ago that the divers were checking to make sure there was no gas leaking. We call it a sniff check. The SpaceX capsule actually comes back to Earth full of fuel, and that rocket fuel can be really dangerous. So they don't just want to have it bump into the boat. They're going to be careful about how they lift it up. And then they'll make sure it's secure and open the hatch and start pulling astronauts out. The thing that I remember when I came back to Kazakhstan on a Russian Soyuz capsule was the smell. It was June, it had just rained, and so it was that desert. If you're ever in Phoenix, Arizona, and you smell the desert rain, that smell just like overwhelmed me, and it was really cool. So they're going to smell the salt water and the dolphins of the Gulf of Mexico.
What are those first few steps like? You need some help, right?
Painful and wobbly. The first few steps weren't steps. There's a big Russian guy in Kazakhstan. He grabs you and he sticks you in a chair, and then you just sit there in the chair and like, whew, and they give you a satellite phone and you can call your family. But the first steps were wobbly. I had, guys are standing right next to you. I didn't fall over. I was able to do everything, but it wasn't a lot of fun. And NASA makes you close your eyes and go 1 foot right in front of the other, like a sobriety test, which is not easy to do, but they'll be fine, but it's not going to be a lot of fun for a few days for them.
Well, and the medical personnel will be there for those initial quick checks before they return to land, obviously on Earth, and they'll be reunited with NASA leadership, with their families as well. Terry, stand by. Let me bring in Jose Hernandez. And Jose, here we see it. You see what looks to be this apparatus now off the boat coming down as the capsule is getting ready to be lifted.
Yes, they're going to hook it up and raise it up and put it on the platform and be able to extract the crew from there. And you see the helipad there. They'll be taken immediately to land and evaluate it further.
The technology is incredible, Jose, that we can see this live from so many different angles now, from NASA TV, from the SpaceX technology that they've put in place here as well.
Yes, you have some amazing drone shots here that you can look at every angle you could imagine and be able to be almost as if you're one of the rescue folks that are extracting the astronauts.
It's an incredibly close look here, Nicole, as we are seeing that capsule getting ready to be lifted out of the water as the sun is setting over the Gulf. You can see for the team members here who have come in to support this splashdown, these are the most critical moments for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's wonderful technology, and that it can look so beautiful and simple even as they perform all this and move so quickly to get the vehicle lifted up safely on the boat, and then that hatched open. And it's almost like it happens so fast that you can't wait to see the faces of the crew members. And I don't know, I just am in awe when I watch this.
Yeah, I think Marissa said it almost looked made for TV. And here we go. We see the capsule being lifted out of the water. You can see the base of it coming up, getting pulled up here let's take a minute here and just watch and listen to these incredible moments. Butch and Suni and the two others on board just seconds away from taking their first steps onto, if not dry land, at least a fairly dry boat in the Gulf. Let's watch. Jose, as you take a look at this here, these are the really special moments here for this crew.
Yes, they are. You know, it takes almost 30 minutes to extract them from the ocean. Now, Terry and myself you know, we landed on the runway in Tierra Firma, and these guys, you know, 30 minutes bebopping in the ocean is probably 30 minutes too many, because they're barely getting used to 1G, and yet here they are bebopping in the ocean. So I'm sure they're happy, and Nicole can attest to that as well.
Terry, this seems to have gone off just about so far textbook.
Yeah, that's the way you want it. I mean, you know, the crew doesn't have much to do in a SpaceX capsule. It's all automated, so you're just sitting there, you know, waiting for the parachute to come out, waiting for splashdown. So this is the way you want it to happen. There's pluses and minuses, like Jose was saying. I agree. I don't think the crew's that happy about being in the ocean. The Soyuz lands on ground, and so it's like driving through your neighborhood and then running into a telephone pole. It's a crash landing. I had a lot of bruises. But as soon as you're on the ground and you're not moving. The water is a little bit softer of a landing, but then you're bouncing up and down. So I think I'd take a few bruises and just be, you know, like rip the Band-Aid off and get back on Earth. But there's pluses and minuses. I'm sure they'll be happy. But once you're in the boat is still moving. So there's still going to be a little bit of motion for them to deal with.
And that's tricky, right? When you've just, as Nicole says, just about 2 hours ago, we're in outer space.
All of their neurons in their brain are saying, all right, I spent my whole life on Earth, and now all of a sudden I was weightless. And then I got that figured out after a few days, and now here I am back on Earth again. Which is it, young feller? Which, you know, your brain gets kind of confused. I was amazed on my second flight. On my first flight, the first 2 days in space were absolutely miserable. And then it was like a light switch went on. And then when I went back a few years later, it was fine. Like my brain had remembered what was going on. It knew what was happening. So it was one of those things that, you know, the human brain is amazing how it adapts.
We're taking a look now, and you can see that capsule swinging a little bit there as it has been latched into that apparatus that is coming off the boat. Emily, SpaceX has done this. They have done this kind of retrieval, obviously, multiple times before, as they continue to try to push the bounds and evolve the technology for these kinds of space exploration missions.
Yeah, this is really only the beginning. I think what's remarkable about this is how routine it's become to see astronauts go into space, see them go into the International Space Station. You know, people have lived in low Earth orbit for more than 20 years now. I think we're coming up on the 25th anniversary this summer. And SpaceX is doing more things, making progress with Starship, launching from Boca Chica to work on Starship to get humans on the moon. They're going to the moon with the NASA Space Launch System, but to get them from lunar orbit, which is going to be tested with Artemis 2, to the surface of the moon is going to need Starship. And so SpaceX still has a long way to go with these developments.
You can see the capsule now. It looks like it's on the boat. It looks like it's maybe getting lifted up a little bit as well. It's a little tough to tell from this angle with the sun backlighting it to a degree, but still just an incredible view of these very dramatic moments on board that boat. And Nicole, this mission that has, in so many ways, captured the nation, this extraordinary spectacle, if you will, of this 10-day mission that turned into nearly 10 months for these two, admittedly, you know, absolute pros. Butch and Suni have handled it by every account, by their own accounts, with grace, with care. They have done the research. They joined that crew 9 on the International Space Station without a hitch here. But it's fascinating to see a mission like this that just takes the attention of the country in a way that we don't always see for space missions.
Yeah, that's true. You know, and I hope, I'm holding my prayer hands that that people really took the opportunity to look into what Suni and Butch got to do in that extra time that they were there. You know, a friend of ours came up with the motto for the space station, which is off the Earth, for the Earth. And it's so cool to think about them, you know, transitioning from what Butch said so wonderfully too. You know, we planned for, you know, a short duration. We prepared for a longer one. And they just rolled with that, doing work in that place that is ultimately about improving life on Earth. And on one hand, I really have to believe they feel like that was a blessing for themselves as well.
When you go up, Nicole, when you get prepared to be, you know, shot off up into space, Are you always thinking in the back of your mind, hey, this mission could last a lot longer than we think? Is that something that you are actively prepared for?
I think as professional astronauts, I think that's what we're trained to be prepared for. And every mission, there's the opportunity, potential for something to not go as planned. And that might be a longer stay on the space station. And if you have to have an extended duration, what better place than that? This machine we've built to mimic what Earth does for us naturally. We're working, as Emily said, in partnership for over almost 25 years now with 15 different countries from around the world, really behaving in a way in that place like we need to bring back to Earth, to be the crewmates down here on Spaceship Earth. Such a wonderful example. And Suni and Butch and their crewmates, Nick and Sasha, were doing that same kind of thing.
So the capsule now is seated and essentially settled into what's called its nest, as they have done the second round of sweeps. So again, another series of safety checks from the crew members on board. We will see the hosing down of the capsule from these recovery crews as well. And Jose, it's important to go through all of the check boxes before they obviously bring those astronauts out onto the boat.
Absolutely. You don't want to make any procedure mistake. Ensure that the capsule is depressurized and good to open up and be able to extract the crew. But I also want to go back to what Dr. Rice said earlier, that it's true that to the public, space flight seems routine, but it's far from it. And this mission basically characterizes that, because we had problems with the Starliner. Space travel is not trivial, and we keep putting challenges in front of us, like going to the moon and going to Mars, which creates even more hazards, and this is why we have to be very careful.
I should note here for folks looking at it, the side hatch is dead center of screen here. That has not been open since Crew 9 launched from the Space Center all of those months ago, nearly 10 months ago. Should also note here that when the astronauts and the cosmonaut come out, they will be put on stretchers, we are being told. That is normal. That is part of the process. That is not going to be necessarily a cause for concern or alarm here. So max capacity on this recovery ship of just about 40 people, just so folks are aware, as we are getting ready now for some of those critical moments. Terry, I'll turn it to you here as somebody who obviously has done this before. The final, can I only compare it to a road trip in my car? Not at all the same, but the last 20 minutes of any road trip, the last few seconds are always the most interminable. And I have to imagine that to a degree, that's what these astronauts are feeling now. Terry, if you're with us. Nicole, how about you?
Yeah, I think you're ready to get out at this point. You had that really amazing ride home. You're reflecting on the time and space. And I think at this point, you're ready to get out. You're probably ready to accept that stretcher and have them carry you to the next spot.
Marissa, let me go to you here with what's next in these next 5 minutes or so. We're getting really close.
Well, everyone, of course, is waiting to see that hatch open. Everyone wants to see, of course, Butch and Suni back on Earth for the first time in over 9 months, closer to 10 months at this point. But of course, as we've been talking about, those medical evaluations, that is going to be the very first thing. And then, of course, they are all going to be, as Tom Costello had noted, there is a plane that is loaded. It is fueled up, ready to take them to Houston Johnson Space Center. And that is where they will get their longer medical evaluations. And just as exciting, of course, reunite with their families, because as we've talked about, Butch and Suni, these astronauts, cosmonauts, all of them know this is an act of service. They are serving their country, their world. So they knew that there was the possibility of having this get extended. I've spoken to several former astronauts about this sort of mindset, right? And you've heard it yourself, Butch and Suni in their communications over the last 9.5 months or so. And they've been consummate professionals. And at the same time, they have acknowledged that this was very difficult for their families. I have seen the social media posts from their family members. At at this point, I have seen the TikTok posts from Butch Wilmore's daughters, and they have acknowledged that they miss their father. It's a normal thing, right? He has a daughter who's in high school. She is about to end her senior year, so I'm sure that there's a lot of eagerness by Butch to catch the very last bit of his daughter's senior year in high school. Suni is married. She's got dogs. So there's a lot here when it comes to, yes, they are professionals, but they also have family members they are so excited to reunite with. And that is what is waiting for them on the ground here once they get off of this boat here.
The capsule pulled in closer as it was being hosed down. We mentioned that there's a lot of salt water that'll come out from underneath that side hatch. And now you see it there, dead center, right on your screen. You see them taking a look at it, getting ready, placing the ladder here in these just remarkably dramatic moments. And Nicole, dramatic every time they happen. It doesn't get any less incredible to see this. Humans in space returning to planet Earth safely and healthy.
Absolutely. And I love what you just said, returning to planet Earth, coming back to Earth. How cool is that? And that we can do that. And that we'll be seeing their smiling faces shortly. They'll be taken well care of. And, I love the commentary about their families as well. All of this stuff is so much more difficult for our families than it is for us. And every single one of us is grateful for their support and their love and for their open arms that will be there when we finally get to see them again. It's a good thing coming back to Earth.
Let's listen in for just a second to the NASA audio feed.
Fresh air since boarding their ships at the start of their journeys last year.
And the very first person that will have the opportunity to say hello to the crew once that hatch is open is a SpaceX medical recovery personnel representative. Then we'll see procedures take place to remove the footrests of Dragon. That will just help the recovery personnel get a little bit more room to access the crew and help get them out of the spacecraft.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Safety is, once again, top priority here, and removing those footrests from all 4 seats will be helpful as a recovery as a SpaceX recovery team member will actually go into the capsule into Dragon Freedom to help the crew members unbuckle and stand up, and essentially we'll also see a fun little slide be put in place to help the crew members exit the spacecraft safely. So we're going to remove all 4 of those footrests to basically give a little bit more working room inside the spacecraft.
That's right. And we did hear the go for that hatch opening. So we're just a couple minutes away from being able to see that. And then we might be able to get the chance to see a couple of views inside of the Dragon and see the crew following their splashdown.
Now, opening that side hatch isn't quite like opening, the door to your car. We have to depress the seal around the side hatch, as well as, we'll now see them open that side hatch up.
Tom Costello is back with us now. And Tom, just incredible to watch this, and a good point there. You don't just pull the door handle and open this thing up. It's going to take a minute.
No, it's going to take a few minutes. They want to do it right. They are sticklers for details. Here they go. Hatch is open.
And there you have it. The side hatch is open for the first time since September.
Look at the scorch marks, Hallie, on the ship. From the intense heat, 3,500 degrees on reentry. Just astonishing the heat that has to withstand.
First time in 9.5 months that hatch has been open. As you saw, one of the recovery crew members head in to help these astronauts and this cosmonaut get out. Let me go to Jose Hernandez. When you're in there, Jose, as you're waiting for the hatch to open, can you move around at all? You're pretty tightly strapped in, right?
Yes, you're pretty tightly strapped in. You can't move around. You got to wait for the extraction crew to unbuckle you and help you out. But the breath of fresh air coming in is great. It makes you sort of conclude that you're actually home. You're here.
Terry shared earlier in our programming here that, Terry, you still remember what it smelled like, that first fresh breath of air that you got when you landed back home.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it had just rained in the desert, and there's a really unique smell in any desert. And it was something that, when I had launched 7 months before, it was cold and freezing and, wintertime. And it was really cool to be back on Earth. And they're getting, right now, they just got this, waft of sea air. And so I'm sure they all noticed that.
And Tom, we heard the NASA crew narrating this talk about essentially what happens to help them get out. We may see them on a stretcher. That is not unusual, right?
No, if you remember, whenever we see astronauts and cosmonauts landing in Kazakhstan, that's normal, right? You always have the Russians who literally bring them out kind of in a reclining chair type of thing that can also be stretched down into a bed. That's normal because, very often, the longer you've been on station, the longer you've been in space, you just are not feeling up to it. First of all, you've come in at about 4.5 Gs or so. You haven't, by the way, of course, they've been in that thing, of course, since 1 a.m. Eastern time. And then on top of that, they've got, some bone density issues. They maybe have muscle coordination. And they may feel sick, which is not unusual. They may be dizzy and nauseated and have, inner ear issues. So they may take this really slow. Let me tell you that there's a medical team standing by on the deck of this ship right now. They will immediately do a first evaluation of the team, of the crew, make sure they're all okay. They looked good coming down. They looked fine as they're sitting in the water. But now they want to do an evaluation. They will chopper them, all of them, over to land to the Tallahassee area where a plane is standing by. But before they get on that plane,
our first
they look
here,
great.
Tom,
They look fine.
At the astronauts on Earth.
Yeah.
Firmly on board, of course, that recovery vessel there, Tom. What a shot. What an incredible moment.
Beautiful. Perfect. So just when they get over to land, again, evaluation, medical evaluation right here. Then when they get over to land, when they get helicoptered over, they will do a baseline, examine all of them. They want to take blood pressure, pulse, EKG. They may pull, pulse ox and blood gases on them. Why? They want to know the baseline levels. What was the first accurate number they have for all those readings once they were back on Earth? And then they will build off of that over the course of the next few days. Then they will fly them to Houston. Houston is where not only will they get to see their families, but they will go through now several days of medical evaluation and medical treatment, lots of engineering debriefs, lots of mission debriefs, but most importantly, they're home and they will be with their families.
Terry, what are they? And we should note here that the next, obviously, major milestone is going to be the crew exiting here. But right now, the recovery team is checking the area, the protective area around the hatch. What are they pulling out of the spacecraft here?
There's always, I forgot the exact term, there's always equipment that you need to get out immediately. So they may be getting some payloads out. It looks like there's some brackets and some equipment that's probably in the way that they need to get out. It was really interesting when they opened the hatch. I don't know if you caught this. The technician basically had an iPhone and he was taking pictures of the seal. And I'm sure they wanted to make sure that the seal was in good shape because even if there's a little, small nick on the seal, the air could leak out. So SpaceX was just doing their safety checks to make sure that black rubber gasket that was around the hatch was in good shape. So it looks they're going to put some boards in. When you get in the space shuttle, they have a special set of boards that you need to climb in and out of the capsule in gravity. In space, it's really easy to get in and out of a Dragon, but on Earth, it's a lot more painful because there's gravity. So they're converting it from spaceship to Earthbound capsule right now.
Yeah, to Earthship, if you will. You're
Earthship,
right about
exactly.
that. Jose, talk us through what else we're seeing here and what's standing out to you.
Well, what's standing out to me is, they're going to be brought out and they're going to take that breath of fresh air. It's going to revive them. And if it's anything like me, after that, I just craved a burger, fries, and a soda. So we'll see what these guys eat after they're checked out with medical.
I have to tell you, I've learned more in the last 2 hours of my life about what astronauts like to eat when they land than I have in my time in this profession. It's amazing to think about here. They're removing the footrest now to give them more space. Jose, let me ask you, you and others, Nicole, Terry, have described it as kind of painful when you come out in this process? And I've read interviews with other astronauts who describe, even sitting in a hard chair can hurt in those first couple of days after. Why is that? Are your bones like literally aching? Is that part of it?
Well, your skin, your muscles have been conditioned to feel no pressure. When you go to sleep up in space, there's no pressure points. When you sleep here on Earth, you sit down on a chair, you got pressure points. Now you got to sort of develop those calluses again so that you don't feel any pain.
Nicole, is that what the experience was like for you as well?
Yeah, and you're so used to moving without any load on your body. And now you're back in gravity where you're this reality check of, oh my gosh, I got to think about standing up, how much my head weighs and holding it up and, kind of rolling out to get onto that little platform that's going to bring them. I mean, I remember feeling like I was doing the heaviest squat I'd ever done in the gym just to kind of get off the floor and stand up. And, your body, those little hairs in your ears are trying to figure it out again. Your body is, I think it was Terry earlier talking about how cool our brains and our bodies are, that they are working really fast to try to readapt. And I can imagine just sitting in their seats inside of this Earth ship now, that's what's happening. They're like, holy moly, I weigh a lot. And I'm having to think about moving now.
Tom, after 121 million miles, essentially, around Earth, we are just seconds away from Butch and Suni and the others taking their very first steps onto, if not dry land, at least a dry boat. It's extraordinary.
It's, this is, can I just be, I think this is why space travel, space engineering is so cool. It is absolutely pushing the limit on engineering and on excellence, right? SpaceX has a reputation for excellence, and this is when it all pays off. By the way, I did the math. They have seen, Butch and Suni have seen 4,500 sunrises and sunsets over the course of the past, 9+ months here. And I'm just looking because it looks to me like, I think they're starting to squeeze out the first astronaut.
We do. Let's listen in for just a second here, Tom, as we watch this.
We can see folks on board clapping as our first crew member.
And that is NASA astronaut Nick Hague, commander of Crew 9, now out of Crew Dragon Freedom.
It looks pretty good.
Smiles, thumbs up, and a wave. Can't get any better than that.
Yeah, that is one happy camper, that's for sure.
Giving a signal to the folks back home that he's doing okay.
It is standard procedure for all of our long-duration crew members to receive assistance upon egressing from the spacecraft. We basically help them move off of the recovery deck and into the private medical quarters for their initial consultation with
And the reason for that, Hallie, the reason they have somebody right there with them to lean on is quite literally, they've had astronauts over the decades get out of the shuttle, they think they're fine, and then they suddenly, after a short time, they kind of keel over and almost pass out. So they want to do this right. Take it easy, take it slow, make sure they're all feeling okay. And of course, the fluid shift inside the body is dramatically different when you're being pulled down by gravity, right? That can mean literally pulling blood away from your head, and as a result, you can get a little nauseated and a little lightheaded.
One astronaut out, 3 more to go, as we have seen Commander Nick Hague. We still have Aleksandr Gorbunov in there, along with Suni Williams, Butch Wilmore as well. Tom, do we know what order they'll come out in? I know we had seen Butch and Suni, I think, on the ends. Yeah. Is it just a function of whoever they can get to first? How does that work?
Well, here you're looking straight at where they were seated. And Nick was in the middle. The commander was in the middle. So he came out first. I suspect you're going to get the Russian cosmonaut coming out next. And then you'll probably end up with Suni and Butch. But I suspect this is going to be Aleksandr Gorbunov, the cosmonaut, who's been with Commander Nick Hague up on the station for 9 months and who has trained with him for quite a while. Let's see.
71 days in space alongside NASA astronaut Nick Hague.
Yep, looks like
Looks like we're getting some cheers and clapping on board as Aleksandr is slid down the little ramp and placed into the mobility aid.
You know, Hallie, can we make
Again,
a point? I think a lot of viewers may be saying, wait a minute, there's a Russian on board? Yes. Amazingly, throughout the entire Russian-American increased tension with Ukraine, the space relationship has remained consistent. We've continued to fly Russians on American spacecraft. They put Americans on their Russian spacecraft, and we cooperate on the ISS. That relationship has remained intact.
Tom Costello, thank you so much. You saw, of course, Aleksandr Gorbunov there giving him another wave and another big grin as he was out. And now the two that are left, Butch Wilmore, Suni Williams, finally, after that unexpected 9.5 extra months in orbit at the International Space Station, they are getting ready to reemerge. And Terry, I have to ask, one of the things that I know happens when you're up in space, when you talk about the fluids and the pressure, your eyes can be affected. How is your vision adjusting as you're coming out of this spacecraft that has now landed, this capsule on the boat, into, you know, what looks to be like daylight, sunlight?
Yeah, it's interesting. The doctors give us prescription glasses, previewing what they think the changes are going to be to your eyes. So I think just about everybody, or if not everybody, has a similar thing in that near vision gets worse and far vision gets better. So, you know, I could see far distance really great, and then my near vision, it was kind of tough to see. When I did my spacewalks, they have these little plastic lenses that you kind of stick to the space helmet. So when you look down at your spacesuit, something that's only 6 inches away, you have to look through this kind of reading glasses. And then when you look up, I didn't need anything. But I was very fortunate. I didn't have any long-term problems. There's been a few astronauts that have had issues with eyes, but knock on wood, my eyes were pretty good. And so the eyesight wasn't too bad. I'm sure of all the things they're experiencing right now, I bet you the eyesight is not one of them. One of the things, I grew about 2 inches when I was in space, and everybody grows a little bit. You just stretch out. And then they say when you get back, you shrink within a few hours. So the flights I was finally 6 feet tall in space, but a couple hours after getting back, I was back to 5'10".
Nicole, for you, the moments of coming back out, reemerging, will they have an opportunity to give a phone call to their family members before they actually get back to Houston to see them in person?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're so thoughtful about that kind of communication with our families. And I know if you had the chance to watch Terry after his landing, you know, one of the first things they get is a satellite phone to call home. And my guess is they've rolled out of that spacecraft and they get into that private little medical tent, and the first thing they're doing is calling their families.
Let's listen in for a second here.
The Dragon had an on-time splashdown. Oh, looks like we're getting our next crew member here. That is none other than Suni Williams. Big smile, big waves. She, like her other crew members, now will be assisted onto the mobility aid.
Suni Williams out of that SpaceX capsule here on planet Earth.
There we have it, some waves, some thumbs up, and some smiles.
Definitely seems to be a theme among all recovery operations.
Marissa Parra, Suni Williams, first glance, she looks great.
Leaves NASA astronaut
She is
Butch
so
Wilmore.
strong, and you know we've been talking about the impact on your body. That didn't stop her from waving, from smiling, and you know you and me, Hallie, have talked about the importance of exercise before. And for people who don't know, I mean, these are not only just brilliant people, and is that Butch Wilmore?
And here, let's listen in here. That was quick.
He's still got a firm handshake.
Once again, some elation
Thumbs
and
up.
cheers there from Butch Wilmore.
More smiles.
As we mentioned before, returning to Earth from
There we have
from
it.
a microgravity environment can
So Hallie,
wreak havoc on the body.
We were
So
talking about the
it is
importance of
customary,
exercise. This is why these astronauts exercised for hours. In addition to all the experiments, it is partially for this moment when they return back to Earth, the impact it has on your bone density. That is why Suni Williams, who is an avid runner, would spend hours on the treadmill. They're weightlifting up there. They're running on those treadmills, which I'm sure are very different than ones we have back here on Earth. And that is going to allow them to adapt back to gravity so much faster than otherwise, Hallie.
Let's listen back for one more second. As you can see, the smiles, the joy, the clapping. You saw the applause from those recovery crew members out there. Let's listen for a sec.
Suni Williams were already aboard the space station when Nick Hague and Aleksandr Gorbunov arrived on the Crew 9 spacecraft in September. Having arrived as the crew flight test crew for Starliner, Wilmore and Williams were fully incorporated into the space station's Expedition 72 team and began research and other work aboard the station along with the other crew members. Williams
the NASA control headquarters there, if you will, the control room, as they were monitoring and getting these astronauts and this cosmonaut back to Earth. Terry Virts, how could you not smile when you see this, that they made it back home after that sort of unexpected Gilligan's Island-esque journey into space?
It's great, and it makes you proud to be an American to see our space program doing well. But even the more amazing thing is that this has been going on since 2000, when Nicole and I showed up a little bit before Jose showed up at NASA. We've been launching astronauts to space and bringing them back to Earth constantly on the Russian spaceship, on the U.S. space shuttle, now on this SpaceX Dragon, hopefully soon again on the Boeing Starliner. So the International Space Station has been an amazing program and really successful, a rare beacon of happiness and the sometimes fraught international relations. So it's been a pretty cool program that we've been doing now for a while.
I'm going to ask you all to stay with me because I want to go to one of our NBC News reporters up near Boston, Jericho Tran, who's with us now at one of those watch parties. I have to think, Jericho, it was just a huge celebration when we saw Butch and Suni emerge from the Dragon capsule.
The entire room erupted into cheers. Everyone was so excited, especially when they saw Suni Williams. You got to understand, this is her hometown, so there are friends here. I'm actually with some former classmates. Maria and Tom, you guys went to school with Suni Williams. I mean, talk to me about what it was like seeing her come out of that spaceship.
Just massive relief. Like, we're so happy she's back home. She was an awesome person in school. She did everything to excellence, and we're just so proud of her.
Tom, I mean, how are you feeling right now?
It's great. It's great to see she came back safe, and she's here, and everything's better.
And I actually had the opportunity to speak with Suni Williams' mother just moments before she touched down. She tells me that she was excited. She's actually going to be heading to Houston to meet with Suni. She said that Suni will be in medical rehabilitation for at least 45 days. They've been working out in space for about 2 hours a day, but she was really looking forward to that. But that's the very latest here in Needham. I'll send it back to you guys.
Jericho Tran, thank you so much from our NBC News station, WBTS, there in Boston at that watch party. And you are seeing those moments that the astronauts have been waiting for nearly 10 months, that the world has been watching and waiting for as well. Quick lightning round here. Final thoughts and what's next? Jose, I'll start with you.
Sure, Haley. Just 2 words. Mission accomplished.
That's it. Nicole?
Woohoo is what I'd like to say. And, thank these guys for showing us what it's like to behave like crewmates. It's a really wonderful thing.
Emily, how about you?
From a professional space fan, I want to say thank you to the astronauts who make the ultimate risk to go on these missions and inspire our country and our entire world. Thank you, guys.
Terry?
What's for dinner?
When will their first meal, how quickly can they eat? Like now? Do they have to wait till they get back to Tallahassee or to further on?
I don't know about Jose and Nicole. I had a big chicken sandwich in the airport in Kazakhstan. It was good, but I didn't want to have a big, plate of enchiladas and stuff. That was maybe a day later.
All right, the readjustment period. Marissa Parr, in the 90 seconds we have left here, next steps, they will go to Tallahassee. They will then be reunited with family members, as you heard from Jericho there, in Houston, which will be a super significant moment for them.
Absolutely. And of course, not just the medical evaluations, but most importantly, those reunions with their families who have been waiting for this moment for so long. The daughters, the family members. And Hallie, in terms of closing thoughts, mine is they make it look easy. Every time I go to NASA, I love walking past, the little stickers, the badges they have. And one of my favorite ones is, well, it is rocket science, right? Because people will joke it's not rocket science, but they make it look so easy, right? And you see Butch Wilmore, Suni Williams, after everything they've been through, and look at that. They made it look so easy. They're waving, they're smiling, and they're consummate professionals through and through. So we all thank them for their service, everything they've done to further our understanding of space and the impacts of long-term impacts on space. Because, of course, we know that they are feeling it, but most importantly, they're excited to be back with their families, Hallie.
Looks like something straight out of Hollywood. But these images that you are seeing here, this is real life. Those astronauts now safely back home on planet Earth. Marissa Parra, Dr. Emily Rice, Nicole Stott, Terry Virts, Jose Hernandez, thank you both. Thank you all so much for being with us, and thanks to our correspondents and to our experts who have joined us along the way for the ride. We're going to have much more coverage coming up right here on NBC News Now of the rest of the process. Stay right here.
And Splashdown, Crew 9 back on Earth.
Tonight, return to Earth. The astronauts left in space for 9 months now, finally back home. The moment their capsule re-entered Earth's atmosphere, the parachutes opening and the astronauts splashing down off of Florida's coast. Dolphins circling the spacecraft, the doors opening their first time breathing fresh air in more than 280 days. And an update tonight from NASA Mission Control. Closer to a ceasefire.
So if you're in the room, be sure to get our attention to ask your question. And if you're on the phone bridge, be sure to press *1 to enter the queue. Before we get started, though, we'll start with some opening remarks from our panel here. And Joel, we'll start with you.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And for those of you tying in remotely, thank you for showing an interest in our great space program. It is awesome to have Crew 9 home, just a beautiful landing. I think many of you heard that back in January, the president asked SpaceX what it would take to bring this crew home. And I will tell you that at the time that question was asked, we were already looking at options of what to do with the Crew 10, Crew 9 situation and how we're going to set that up. I'll tell you a little bit, when you plan these dynamic activities, a lot of work goes into them. For example, for the landing that you guys just witnessed today, there's a number of things that we look at, a number of factors, weather being one of them. You saw great weather today. In addition, we look at the readiness of the recovery team to make sure they're ready to go. We look at the handover time on orbit between the incoming crew and the departing crew to make sure there's enough time for activities to be accomplished before the departing crew leaves. We do have the benefit of having NASA astronaut Don Pettit remaining on board. He'll be coming home on Soyuz in April, and so he'll continue the handover with the crew. We also look at the vehicle traffic, the vehicles coming and going. And when you pull all that together, the International Space Station program, the Commercial Crew program, and SpaceX came up with the plan that we just witnessed. The Crew 10 launch last week, the docking over the weekend, the undock early today, and then the landing that we just witnessed. So just an incredible amount of inputs that you get to pull all that together in order to have a successful operation. I want to tell you, we want to thank the Crew 9 team and the ground teams for their dedication to excellence, their resilience, their flexibility during this expedition, everything they did to have a successful expedition, as you have all witnessed. SpaceX has been an incredible partner for us, and it shows the benefits of the commercial public-private partnership that we have. So they've just been a huge, great partner throughout all this. Crew 9, in addition to the spacewalks that many of you witnessed, they performed just about 150 experiments on board the International Space Station with over 900 hours of research. And the work we do on the International Space Station benefits the nation, benefits people on Earth, and are the building blocks for going back to the moon and to Mars. So Nick, Aleksandr, Butch, and Suni, welcome home. On behalf of NASA, I want to thank the administration. I want to thank all the work of the NASA teams and all the work of the SpaceX teams. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Commercial Crew Program Manager Steve Stitch.
Thanks, Joel, and thank you all for being here. Greatly appreciate your interest in the Commercial Crew Program and also human spaceflight. Of course, as you know, it's been just a huge week for Commercial Crew. The missions, I think, sometimes seem easier than they are. If I just step back and think about all the challenges we had to launch Crew 9, moving to a different launch pad, adjusting the seats and the crew training, and then, over the weekend, once we docked Crew 10 safely, looking at the weather patterns, finding this great opportunity that we landed at today, adjusting the timeline. It's never easy. Spaceflight's always dynamic. Sometimes it seems like things move from step to step to step, but there's usually different paths along the way. So the weekend was culminated today with the landing of Crew 9. We Dragon splashed down at about 5:57 p.m. off the coast of Tallahassee. That's our first Commercial Crew Program landing at Tallahassee. We've had a couple cargo flights land there. And now it's great to have Crew 9 and the Freedom capsule back home, and its fourth flight is now in the history books. Of course, we're overjoyed. I watched every crew member come out of the vehicle today. Post-landing, it was great to watch Nick, Suni, Butch, and Aleksandr come out of Dragon and smile and wave as they came out of the vehicle. We'll get them, they're on the ship now, we'll get them back to meet the NASA aircraft and then back to meet with their families. If you watched the weather today, it was incredible. Clear skies, real low winds, maybe 3 or 4 knots of wind, and really calm seas. You could see the dolphins swimming around the capsule, which was kind of incredible. SpaceX had a nice drone aircraft flying around and taking footage, and that was just incredible. As I said, the ops team just did a phenomenal job over the weekend, pulling in the landing to get the crew home sooner and take advantage of this great weather opportunity. Really appreciate the versatility of SpaceX, the ISS program, commercial crew program, and the flight ops team in planning out the timeline, looking at the crew's workload, determining whether we could pull this off, doing sleep shifting, all those sorts of things that made this an opportunity happen. I also want to thank our partners at the U.S. Coast Guard. They were there on scene, protecting the scene and making sure that it was safe for mariners in the area. The FAA, the Department of Defense, continuing to support us. You know, it's great to see the teams really in action. Overall, I would say it was a really clean undocking, reentry, and landing. The Dragon vehicle performed extremely well, didn't really have any issues to work. You know, little things, a GPS outage that we reset a filter on and things like that. Today, the sequence went perfectly. We jettisoned the trunk, executed the deorbit burn, closed the nose cone, and did the entry. You could hear Nick call down when we finally got the vehicle back through the blackout, 4.6 Gs, and you could tell they were doing well, and then braced for the parachute deploy of the drogues and then the mains, and then having splashdown. So parachutes performed well. The whole system worked just as planned. The crew's doing great. You know, they'll spend a little time on the recovery ship getting checked out, making sure that they're healthy and ready to go, and then eventually they'll make their way back to Houston. Again, I want to congratulate the entire NASA commercial crew program, the SpaceX team. You know, in many ways, if I step back to last year, this has been 9 months in the making, and I couldn't be prouder of our team's versatility, our team's ability to adapt and really build for the future of human spaceflight and looking at different ways to do business, taking advantage of one vehicle to launch a crew and then bring back the crew in a different vehicle. Our partner SpaceX did a tremendous job. Every time we asked them to do something a little different, they stepped up and to the plate and did that, including swapping capsules 6 weeks ago prior to Crew 10, and then also adjusting the Crew 9 mission. You know, we'll celebrate for a while. We're going to take some time in commercial crew to celebrate this one and spend a little time with the crew, and then we'll move on to Crew 11. Crew 11 will be here before we know it. We'll launch that vehicle as early as mid-July, so we'll start preparing for that. And then, you know, we're working hand in hand with Boeing as well on certification of Starliner, getting that vehicle back to flight. You know, Butch and Suni's return on Dragon, to me, shows how important it is to have two different crew transportation systems, the importance of Starliner and the redundancy that we're building in human spaceflight for our low Earth orbit economy. We're super grateful for Boeing as well and their investment. They're keenly interested in the landing today. They have a watch party going on and are watching Butch and Suni come back. And they've texted me, you know, at the build up to this, they're very keenly interested in Butch and Suni. And then we're interested in their resilience. That whole Boeing team, like our whole commercial crew program team, is resilient and moving forward to the next steps on Starliner. It's been a busy start to 2025. It's hard to believe we're in the middle or toward late March. Looking for an exciting summer as well, and I look forward to your questions, and I'll hand it over to Bill.
All right, thanks, Steve. Yeah, welcome, and thanks for everybody's interest as we continue on. Return today marks the successful completion of the Crew 9 mission, and really with them handing over operations on board to Crew 10. Just some interesting stats as we go through. Nick and Aleksandr both spent 171 days in space on this trip, seeing the arrival and departure of 4 different visiting vehicles to the ISS. Butch and Suni spent 286 days in space, and they got to see 8 different visiting vehicles coming and going from the ISS. We stay really busy as we talk about all these vehicles coming and going from the station. Nick and Butch each conducted 1 spacewalk, and Suni conducted 2. That actually gave Suni the record for most time on spacewalks by a woman, and puts her 4th overall in terms of time outside doing spacewalks. The crew contributed to more than 150 unique experiments, like Joel said, including stem cell technology to potentially address blood diseases, autoimmune disorders, and cancers. They tested lighting systems to help maintain circadian rhythms, which will help improve conditions for not only future crews as you go through spaceflight, but also those on the ground for shift workers and those in extreme or remote environments. They did plant growth and quality experiments to support future Moon and Mars missions as we look forward with that. They loaded a really interesting experiment. JAXA had their first wooden satellite. They loaded that into and got that deployed from the ISS. And then as part of their spacewalk, Butch and Suni collected samples from the station's exterior to study the survivability of microorganisms in the vacuum of space. I'll tell you, the Crew 9 crew did a great job here in the near term supporting this shortened handover period with Crew 10 and enabling that landing opportunity that we saw today. There was a lot of work that they did ahead of Crew 10 arrival to get prepared, and then really working through all of the things that we need to do to hand over the emergency procedures to the crew, to get the cargo transferred that they need to, and to get all the vehicles set up for Crew 10 to be very successful. Crew 10 is already working hard, and they're working on key science investigations on board. They already kicked them off even while they were getting prepped for undocking the other day. So coming up on ISS, we still have a lot going on. We have NG-21 release at the end of March, providing some important trash disposal for the space station. Always, you got to get rid of all the stuff that you bring up, so you got to bring that down somehow, and NG-21 is going to take away a lot of that. And then we'll look forward to Soyuz MS-27 launch Tuesday, April 8th from Baikonur Cosmodrome at about 12:47 a.m. Central. That'll be carrying NASA astronaut Johnny Kim and cosmonauts Sergei Ryzhikov and Alexei Zabritsky. And then before Soyuz MS-26 returns, Alexei Ovchinin will pass on the role of ISS commander to our JAXA astronaut Takuya Nishi. Really a lot of great stuff continuing on station. I really appreciate the entirety of the team, joint with SpaceX, NASA, our operations team, the program teams, the engineering teams, all the work it takes to turn around these missions. It's a ton of stuff, and then we go change it on them at the last minute, and they handle it like the pros that they are. So welcome home to Crew 9, and with that, I'll hand it over to Sarah.
All right, thanks, Bill. Well, it's a good day to be here at SpaceX, and it's a good day down in Florida as we welcome Crew 9 home from their stay at the International Space Station. We're happy to have safely returned Nick, Alex, Suni, and Butch back to Earth and to their families after their time at the orbiting laboratory. Human spaceflight is dynamic and exciting, and this crew knows that as well as any other. So back in September, Steve was talking about this a bit, Crew 9 became the first human spaceflight mission to launch from Pad 40 using our new Dragon tower that we completed construction on last year. And it was our first mission in a while to fly a crew of 2 since Bob and Doug's historic flight in 2020. So then just 3 days ago, we launched Crew 10 to take over and continue the work of Crew 9 on ISS. And I forgot to mention this Friday night, but Crew 10 was our 50th Dragon mission since first launching COTS 1 in December of 2010. That's a huge milestone for the team. COTS, if you don't remember, stands for Commercial Orbital Transportation Services. And COTS 1 was the first demonstration mission under that original partnership with NASA to resupply the space station with cargo flights. It was also the mission that inspired me to join the SpaceX team, which I'm so grateful I was given the opportunity to do a few months later. So the rest is history. We've been bringing cargo and more recently crews to the orbiting lab for well over a decade since. And as we talked about a few days ago after Crew 10 launch, NASA and SpaceX adapted as this mission evolved. And I appreciate all the kind words said already during this press conference. As we adapted together, we kept safety at the forefront. And thanks to the teamwork across the 2 agencies, a change in the Dragon spacecraft for Crew 10 and then a shortened handover helped accelerate the Crew 10 launch and the Crew 9 return. Then over the weekend, we decided as a joint team to undock a day earlier than originally planned to take advantage of some great weather we were seeing off the coast of Tallahassee for Splashdown. So I know this required quite a bit of creativity from the NASA team and the onboard crew to compress the handover even further than they already had. And I'm thankful for everyone's hard work and flexibility to safely bring Dragon and the crew home today. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that today's return was also our final Dragon recovery on the East Coast. So after 6 years of successful recovery operations off the coast of Florida, we'll now be moving all Dragon recovery operations back to the West Coast. I just hope the California coast can bring as many dolphins as we saw during today's operation. That was really fun to see. We had a nominal return today. Dragon is healthy and the parachutes performed as expected. The crew is likely on the recovery vessel now, soon to transit to the SpaceX NASA handover location, while the SpaceX vessel transports Dragon back to our refurbishment facility at Cape Canaveral in Florida. It's amazing to think that SpaceX has now safely flown 62 crew members from 14 countries to space, 52 of those to and from the International Space Station. Dragon has supported 46 missions to the station in all, and 29 of those on reflown Dragons. I think that's enough flights that we can be really proud of what the team has built together and what we've accomplished, but always with the humility and awareness that we will continue to learn every single mission. The stakes of getting this right are and always will be high. And as Bill Gerstenmaier often says, we must always stay hungry and vigilant to scour the data before, during, and after every operation we perform. It's always an honor for all of us here at SpaceX to launch human spaceflight missions and safely return astronauts and cosmonauts as we continue to advance human spaceflight. Thanks for having me on the briefing today and look forward to your questions.
All right, thank you all for your opening remarks. We will go ahead and start taking some questions in the room, so please raise your hand, Gina. Go ahead.
I think this is for Steve Stitch. I mean, Crew 9's home, but the research hasn't stopped, because what you need to know about what happened with Butch and Suni on orbit, that's still an ongoing medical research project. Would you kind of expand on that for me? What will you learn about their 9 months on the space station?
Yeah, I think I can comment and then see if Bill has anything to add. But, every single crew member that we fly in orbit, we collect medical research data. We do various blood draws at various times during the flight, especially toward the end. Do bone density measurements in space. We look at their vision and how their vision might change over time, their intracranial pressure. We do all kinds of things. So you're right. Every single astronaut, when they come back, including Nick and Aleksandr, is participating in all kinds of experiments, and we're learning from all those. And I'll see if Bill has anything to add. I mean, I think you covered the vast majority of it. We look at everybody when they come home, and every duration adds to that database of knowledge of the effects of spaceflight on the human body. And so we continue to look at that across all of our crew members.
Okay, we'll take another question here in the room. Mark, go ahead.
Mark Strassman, CBS News. Steve, I want to pick up on something you said, which is the keen interest in Butch and Suni. All 5 major television networks cut in with live special reports following the splashdown, because Butch and Suni have arguably become America's most famous astronauts over the course of their 9-month saga. So now that they're home, now that the saga is over, what do you is the takeaway?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I haven't probably had a lot of time to reflect. We're certainly looking at Starliner very carefully. We're in the process of looking at that vehicle, looking at the helium system. We've got some candidate seals that we're going to replace. We'll get into some testing here over the summer timeframe with what we call an integrated doghouse at White Sands. So we're looking at that. The thing I think back of this whole timeframe is how really resilient Butch and Suni were the whole time. I mean, they launched on what was going to be a short test flight with the crew flight test vehicle with Boeing. And then they moved very quickly into station increment operations, and they became seamlessly part of the International Space Station. And they did that because they're experienced astronauts, and we had prepared, right? We had flown gloves for them to do spacewalks, and we had flown a lot of components for them. So I think that shows the adaptability of crew members. And if I think forward to exploration and maybe some harsh missions to the Martian surface someday, or back to the moon, the adaptability of crew members, changing the timeline for their return. Certainly a huge thank you to their families. When you think about Butch and Suni, they enjoyed their time on station. They got to do spacewalks, and they got to do lots of cool science and things like that. Their families are the ones that really, kudos to them for being resilient in a planned short duration flight, now turning into a long duration. And I think back of when they went into quarantine. They went into quarantine in the April timeframe for the early May launch that we had for crewed flight tests. So the families, a huge thank you to them. I'm sure the reunion is going to be wonderful with the families. And we'll keep learning as we go and keep being adaptable in the future.
Let me just add, if it's okay, it shows the flexibility of our commercial providers. The fact that they flew up on the Boeing vehicle and home on SpaceX, this is a lesson learned for NASA too, such that when we do have Boeing and SpaceX both flying on a regular basis, we need to be able to do the opposite too. If we come up on a SpaceX vehicle and have a problem to be bringing people home on a Boeing vehicle, it shows you, this year, I think many of you know, we celebrate 25 years of crewed on the International Space Station, and just shows the flexibility we have with the space station and our commercial partners.
We'll take our next question here in the room. Go ahead.
Ed Lavandero with CNN. Two questions. Do you have specifics on the timeline of when the astronauts will be landing back here in Houston and reuniting with their family over the next, I'm presuming, the next few hours? And then secondly, the more delicate question is, of all the talk that we've seen over the last months that these astronauts had been, quote, stranded in space, how did that kind of talk affect you guys over the last few months in formulating a plan to get them back home?
Yeah, I don't have the specifics of the timeline. I know they're going to fly back here tonight. They'll probably spend some time rehabilitating a little bit, and the doc's watching them, and then they'll rejoin their families in the next, day or so. Relative to the mission planning, I think what we did was we tried to look for opportunities to bring the crew back when it was safe to do so, and we always had a lifeboat, a way for them to come home, all the way back to Starliner. If you remember, during the Starliner crewed flight test mission, we said if there were an emergency during part of that mission, we considered the thrusters, the service module thrusters, good enough to bring the crew back then. We then transitioned to the Crew 8 vehicle for a temporary time frame until Crew 9 arrived. So we always had a way to get the crew home safely should we need to. And then it really became, when is the right time? When is the right time to bring them back? And then when we had to swap over Dragon capsules from the new vehicle, which wasn't quite ready, we moved to Capsule 210. We figured this March timeframe was the timeframe to execute this direct handover that we just did. So for me, it's been the normal kind of planning I do all the time, looking at all the options, working with SpaceX, working with the space station program, and finding the right time to bring the crew back.
Okay, we'll take another question here in the room.
Hi guys, my name is Vanna Henderson. I'm with KHOU 11, the CBS affiliate here in Houston. 10 days turning into 9 months, but turning also into hundreds of hours of invaluable research that they got up there at the ISS, and also moonwalk hours. Can you talk a little bit about how, when you realized that they were going to be up there for longer than the intended time frame, they were able to transition into getting that invaluable research started?
Yeah, I can start with that one, and I can let these guys add in. So even before they launched, because we knew they were flying on a test mission, we provided all the training for the stay on ISS that they would need to be a long-duration crew member. We flew the equipment. Every crew has unique equipment that they need to do a spacewalk, and we made sure we had that up there. So I think it really comes to the preparation that we did even before they flew that allows them to be so successful when they get up there. And that's really what we do with all of the crews that fly to the ISS. There's the rigorous training program that they go through. They're prepared for things. They have a lot of skills-based training that goes on so that they know how to do the basics of everything. And then we have an outstanding team on the ground working with them. They get to work directly with the scientists in a lot of cases on experiments that help walk them through what they're doing, video downlinks. We have a lot of different ways to kind of help them through, and it really just enables everything that they then do on board in an effective manner. But it all starts with that preparation that we did ahead of time, knowing that we have a test mission coming.
I do think the difference, like the shuttle missions had a finite duration. The way the space shuttle worked, it had fuel cells, and they used liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen to power those fuel cells. And so at some point, that vehicle had to return. But the beauty of the space station is wonderful laboratory, wonderful place for the astronauts to live and work, and you can almost stop the clock if you have a problem. And I think that's something that we learned on this flight that's a little bit different is, so when Starliner we had planned for maybe a short 10 to 2 week mission for a test flight. When we needed more time, we took that time to understand the vehicle. And then when we determined that the better option would be to bring Butch and Suni back on Dragon, we pivoted over to that plan. So I think Station gives us that flexibility that we never had before. And we also have flexibility now, as Joel said, with 2 different vehicles. So someday there may be a case where we're using Starliner to to handle a Dragon contingency problem of some sort. So we have a luxury that maybe we didn't have in the past, and so we're adapting and learning from that.
All right, we'll head over to our phone bridge to Marcia Dunn with the Associated Press.
Yes, good evening. Probably for you, Steve. I understand the crew is being flown to Houston tonight and that they'll be staying at JSC and crew quarters. When will they be able to go home if they're feeling good? How much time off do they get before they have to go back to work? Are you giving them some extra bonus vacation? And when do you have to decide whether Starliner is going to be carrying Crew 12 up? What's the deadline for deciding on that mission, whether it'll be Starliner or Dragon? Thanks.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions there. I hope I get all of them. Let's see. The first question was, when do they go back to their families? It's usually within a day or two, once they're cleared medically, that we make sure, as they readapt to gravity here on Earth, it's usually a day or two. They'll go back to their families. And then, they'll get some time off, and then we've done a lot of, fortunately with Butch and Suni, we've done a lot of debriefs already with them. And so we've gotten feedback on Starliner and feedback on many things for the crewed flight test already from them while they were on orbit. They'll have a standard set of debriefs with the Crew 9 crew because they really have been part of Crew 9 ever since Crew 9 docked. So they'll go through a series of debriefs, and then, but they will get some well-deserved time off, well-deserved time with their families. It's been a long time for them, and look forward to hearing their stories about meeting with their family. I think the last question, Marcia, was when do we have to decide Crew 12 versus the next step with Starliner? And we probably have a little bit more time as we get into the summer and understand the testing we're going to go do to make that decision, whether it be Crew 12 as the next flight or Starliner. We're also looking at some options for Starliner. Should we need to, of flying it uncrewed? The vehicle has the capability to fly uncrewed if we need to. And so we'll kind of weigh all those things as we get the testing and analysis behind us. Boeing's done a good job of developing a new thermal model, which we're using to try to understand the changes we're going to make in those dog houses. We'll add some tape and thermal barriers in different places. So we have a little time to make that decision.
Okay, our next question is from Chris Davenport with The Washington Post.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for taking my question, and congrats on a successful end to the mission. For Steve Stitch, you had mentioned your discussions with Boeing, and I'm just wondering, has Boeing given you a 100% commitment that they are sticking with the program, just given the enormous costs they've had to eat? And is NASA doing anything to incentivize them to stay? You just mentioned an uncrewed flight, for example. Thanks.
Yeah, Boeing, all the way up to their new CEO, Kelly, has been committed to Starliner. I can see that in the way they're approaching their solution to the problems. They're taking the time to understand the leaks we had in the helium system and testing some new seals that we may field in those flanges. The same thing with the test plans that are multifaceted for the thrusters, some testing of the Teflon material, testing, integrated testing at White Sands. So I see them being very committed. They want to provide a transportation system with crewed capability to fulfill their missions. And then they're even, I think, stepping beyond that and thinking about low Earth orbit and COMLEO destinations with their vehicles. So I see a commitment from Boeing to continue the program. They realize that they have an important vehicle, and we were very close to having a capability that we would like to field. I think we have some changes we need to make to the way we heat those thrusters, the way we fire those thrusters, and then we can test that on the next flight. So,
our next question is from Ken Chang with the New York Times.
Hi, thank you. This is for Joel, Steve, and Sarah. The White House put out a statement that said the landing today, representing President Trump, keeping his promise to rescue the astronauts stranded in space. And from what you just said during this news conference, I think it's been in the works for months, and a lot of work for everyone. I was just wondering, could you explicitly answer the question, if Kamala Harris were president, or if Joe Biden had run for re-election and won, would anything have changed with this mission? Thank you.
NASA as an agency, we work for the president, and who's ever there, we work for them. We had an input from that office. We took a look at it, and our job is to take all the inputs we get and operate as successful and safely as we can. And that's what we would do for this administration, and that's what we would do for any administration.
Our next question is from Sana with Bloomberg News.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my question. I had another question regarding Boeing. I know you just mentioned that you're looking at options for an uncrewed mission. So I guess we're wondering who would pay for the uncrewed mission, and would Boeing be required to redo the crewed test flight as well? Thanks.
Yeah, what we're looking at right now is we really want what I would call is a crewed capable vehicle. So even if we were to fly the vehicle without a crew in the return back to the next steps on with Starliner, we want that to be crew capable. So we want it to have all the systems in place that that we could fly a crew with. And in fact, as I think about it, it might be there for a contingency situation as we prepare for whatever events could happen. One of the things that I've learned in my time at NASA is always be prepared for the unexpected, always have options. And so that's what we're thinking about. So we'll take those steps forward. We'll look at the test data. We'll make a decision whether to fly it crewed or uncrewed. And then, we are trying to do it under what we call this post-certification phase of the contract. And Boeing has delivered a lot of the certification data already. They have a little bit more to go relative to the prop system. I think we talked about they're flying a new spacesuit eventually, and a few other things like that. So we're looking at doing it under that phase of the contract, and NASA meeting its commitments on those flights.
Our next question is from Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now.
Hi, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today, and congrats on the splashdown of Crew 9. Maybe just following up on Ken's question to Joel and Stitch and Sarah. Obviously, as you've discussed tonight and over the last several months, the plan has been established for some time on how to bring Butch and Suni back to Earth. But barring them returning on the seats that were added on the Crew 8 Dragon spacecraft, had the decision been made to try to bring them back any earlier, was there a Dragon spacecraft that would have been available to operate that mission prior to the Dragon that we just saw support the launch of Crew 10? Thanks.
Yeah, the earliest Dragon that we had to go fly the mission really was this capsule 210. And so when we were planning originally on Crew 10 to have the newer spacecraft, we thought it would be ready. And initially, we were going to launch in mid-February. We moved it to March 25th. And then I think Sarah talked briefly before about some of the challenges we had, or maybe it was Mr. Gerstenmaier, with a battery system that was a bad component we had to pull off. We had to pull the heat shield off and vector out of some work on the vehicle. We had some challenges with some valves in the prop system. And this, to me, is just evidence of how complicated. I don't think we always do a super good job of explaining how complicated the spacecraft itself is made up of millions of components that have to work in an integrated fashion. And you go through testing and qualification to get there. And so those components didn't work. And when we looked at that, we just pivoted over to the vehicle that was going to be ready the soonest, which was Capsule 210, and that led us to the March 12th date and then eventually the March 15th launch.
Our next, yeah, and maybe I would just add that with 5 Crew Dragon spacecraft in the fleet, certainly many paths are possible, right? With the allocations as we had them with our current slate of missions in the next 12 to 18 months, exactly as Steve said, it was the new spacecraft that was anticipated to be ready first, with the one we ended up flying shortly on the heels, and then when we ran into a processing issue on that new vehicle, the other one could be ready sooner, and so those were the 2 that were coming available. But certainly we can pivot and adapt. Flexibility is the name of the game, right? And so if we change what lanes or what stage of the flow any given spacecraft is in, we can open up other options available. But we had these vehicles allotted to or allocated to specific missions, and these were the 2 spacecraft that met the need that we had here in the spring to fly these missions in the timeframes that they were requested.
All right, our next question is from Joey Roulette.
Hey, thanks. Just 2 questions. One quick one for Steve. I just want to be clear. So it sounds like the testing results that you guys are going to have with Starliner this summer and maybe later on is going to determine whether its next mission is uncrewed or crewed. And whatever that next crewed mission is that going to be like a routine certification crewed mission, or might there be another CFT? And then the second question is for Bill Specht. I was just wondering if there's any studies that Butch and Suni are involved in that investigates the like behavioral or psychological kind of response to not just long duration spaceflight, but unexpected changes to the to a mission in the middle of it. Thanks.
Yeah, when we look back at the crewed flight test, we got a lot of good data out of that flight relative to having a crew on board. So really the thing that we need to solidify and go test is the prop system and the service module. We need to make sure we can eliminate the helium leaks, eliminate the service module thruster issues that we had on docking, and then the rest of the vehicle performed really well. So when we look forward, what we'd like to do is that one flight and then get into a crew rotation flight. So the next flight up would really test all the changes we're making to the vehicle, and then the next flight beyond that, we really need to get Boeing into a crewed rotation. So that's kind of the strategy. Yeah, and then to your second question, all of our crew members go through evaluations. They fill out surveys. They do medical evals. So all of these things happen on every crew member. So we do get some unique data from Butch and Suni based on their stay, but it's something that we do with every crew member that flies. There's always changes that happen on board. There's always adjustments that we have to make that all of the crew members adapt to. As you've watched with our flight schedule over the years, it's very rare that we actually get a flight to fly exactly where we planned it 2 years out when they were thinking it was going to be. So it's okay that we have these changes and they adapt really well. But everybody gets kind of looked at in terms of those effects and understanding just the effects of spaceflight on them. So.
Okay, our next question is from Maria with KBIR Knoxville.
Hi, yes, thank you so much for your time. If someone can walk me through the physical and mental adjustments that the astronauts are going to be experiencing.
I can try and see if Bill and Joel have anything to add. When they get back, the body is an amazingly adaptable. The one thing that the body will struggle a bit with is the inner ear and the vestibular response in microgravity. When you transition from 1G here that we're sitting in this room to then in space, the inner ear can get a little disturbed because gravity's not pulling the fluid down and the little hairs inside the inner ear. And so the crew can take a little while to adapt to microgravity. That same thing happens in reverse when you land back on Earth. The human body was adaptable and was used to being in microgravity. Now, the vestibular response is such that you feel disoriented, you may feel a little dizzy, you may have trouble getting up. And then, of course, physically, their body, when they were operating in space and doing operations inside the various modules, their muscles weren't working as hard, their heart wasn't working as hard, and so there's a muscular and cardiovascular kind of reconditioning that has to happen. And so that's what's happening now. And then, there's a little bit of response coming back to 1G. In space, I could let this pin, release this pin, and it's going to stay right where it is. And, in 1G, if I release the pin, it falls. And so there's a little bit of that the crew has to get back and learn the skills back here on Earth again. So.
Okay, our next question is from Jackie with the Times of London.
Hello, and thank you. I'm sorry if this is a really frustrating question because I know there's so much good work done on this mission, but there has been a fictitious narrative woven around it by prominent people who are hard to ignore. Why has NASA not pushed back more emphatically against that and against the use of astronauts by one of its commercial contractors as political pawns? And what's to be lost by simply correcting that narrative for the sake of the public who have paid for the mission? Thank you.
You know, I would say, you know, our job at NASA is to successfully and safely fly these missions. We fly it with the laws of physics, and we fly it with our commercial partners. And so oftentimes there may be things out in the press that that may not be exactly what's happening. And our job is to fly these missions, and regardless of what you read in the press, our job is to fly successful missions, safe missions, and do the science we do on board the International Space Station. You know, I mentioned this year 25 years of continuous crew presence on board later this year, the International Space Station. And we do about 150 experiments every expedition we fly. So think about it, every 6 months. I think we're over 3,000 experiments since we started the International Space Station, and that's what we focus on.
Okay, our next question is from Jeff Faust with Space News.
Hey, good evening. Question for Bill or Steve. Since the Crew 9, Crew 10 handover lasted only a couple of days, was there anything you would normally do on a handover you weren't able to do in this case? And in the future, might you consider shorter handovers between future commercial crew missions? Thanks.
Yeah, across the board, the main thing that we have to get done is, like anytime you get to a new place, is the emergency briefings. Where do I go in case of an emergency? What are my duties in terms of an emergency? And that happens very early on. And then the follow-ons are more of the general, hey, where did you guys put this thing? Or where did you put that? Where did you leave this wrench when you get up there? Because you can imagine the size of the space stations is so large, and there's a lot of stuff up there. So a lot of the handover that we do with the crews is more set up to be an efficiency gain. And that really helps them be more effective when they go and get to the tasks done that we need to. So when we reduce that time, we reduce that efficiency in the near term to accomplish the tasks on board. We evaluate that each time and understand what our handover is. In general, we don't look to reduce that because we want to be as efficient as possible. We want to get everything done in the most efficient manner, get the most things done on space station that we can. But in this case, it was actually to our advantage to go work that shorter handover and then get them home as quicker, hitting this weather day that we had here today, and not leave it up to how the weather was going to behave days and days from now. So the critical stuff always gets done, that emergency handover, that how do we go handle contingencies on board. They're trained on the ground for all of these things, and we have a lot of support for the teams on the ground to help them as they go, so we can shorten it if we want to, but it's not quite the same as getting up there and finding out from the person that's been up there for 6 months, hey, I found that this was the best spot to put this, or I left this here, and so when you need it, go look over there to go do this, or this is the best way to go pull out this drawer, or whatever you have to do for your experiments on board. So nothing beats that face-to-face handover and the time they get up there, but we have the options to shorten it when it makes the most sense.
Okay, our next question is from Sawyer with NASAspaceflight.com.
Thank you so much. This question is, I believe, for Sarah. With this being the final splashdown on the east coast of the United States, what is the plan for Megan? Is that going to be repurposed to the west coast? Is that going to stay on the east coast? And then what becomes the contingency if, for example, the weather isn't good at the planned Pacific landing sites, whereas here you had the Gulf and the Atlantic?
Hey, we don't know the answer yet to what will happen, what will become of Megan. We've got Shannon here on the West Coast. I'm sitting here in California right now, and there's unique benefits and unique challenges of weather patterns on the West Coast versus the East Coast. Just one example, we have far more stable weather in terms of wind and wind speed, wave height than we did in Florida. So where we needed numerous sites on both coasts of Florida to provide geographic diversity to avoid weather patterns that may be happening in one area and not another, not so much the case on the West Coast. However, our cloud cover is different here than in Florida. And so things like the airborne assets that support our mission might have different challenges out here than over there. So we've done a lot of trying to learn from meteorologists and historical weather patterns, and then figure out the right number of sites and the right number of support assets to ensure that we maintain a high return availability, which means a high percentage of days that would be a viable return option with a safe splashdown, regardless of what coast we're splashing down on.
All right, our next question is from Isam with AFP. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. I was on mute. A couple of quick questions. Steve, you mentioned that they'd be released to their families in a day or two, but they're still going to be going through with rehabilitation for quite a while, right? If you could discuss that. And the other second question is just a bit broader to follow on from some of my colleagues. As Steve confirmed that, Crew 10 was the designated mission that this could happen, could you help us sort of square that circle that, with praising the administration for accelerating the timeline? How concretely, just to follow up on my colleagues' questions, how concretely can the administration be credited with accelerating the recovery when, the plan hasn't fundamentally changed here? It's just something that we're having a little bit of trouble understanding. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll talk the rehabilitation and I'll let Joel talk about the other questions. Rehabilitation will continue. There's a sequence of exercises that they do to try to regain their physical strength over a number of weeks. It's a pretty standard protocol that they go through post-landing to recover. It's well documented and well practiced, and the docs and the trainers that do this work will kind of follow each crew member, whether it be Butch and Suni or the others. We talk about Butch and Suni because they had a 9-month stay, but the others had 171-day stay or so, which is pretty typical of what we've had. And I'll let Joel handle the other questions.
And so you were asking the input from the administration. So I think Ken Bowersox said it well the other day. It excited the system, right? It gave us some energy in the system. But the other input was to do this successfully and safely. And that's why I talked about all the different inputs that you get. We got the input from the White House, but you also have to look at the vehicle readiness. We talked about looking at weather. We talked about recovery team, handover, the vehicle traffic going to and from the International Space Station. So when you put all that together, we came up with I thought, a pretty good plan that the teams executed over the last 4 or 5 days.
All right, we'll take the next question here in the room.
Darlene Ferris with Fox 26 Houston. I was just wondering if any of the experiments or tasks, was there anything that was able to be done due to the unexpected extra manpower with them on board that wouldn't have like a benefit to having the extra people?
So we, once Crew 9 arrived and Crew 8 departed, we were at our normal crew level. So we managed within the normal kind of cadence that we did there. But before that, we absolutely took advantage of Butch and Suni being there and having the extra hands. We had some maintenance activities that had to be done over the summer that would have potentially taken away from some of the science that we were doing that we didn't have to take away from that time because of the fact that we had the extra hands there. So it was great having them there over the summer as extra hands to help out with a number of activities going on.
Okay, we'll take our next question here in the room.
This may be premature, but initial reports from the recovery ship just about their condition and how they're doing, has anybody heard?
I haven't heard anything specifically from the recovery team, but just in looking at the way as they came out of Dragon, they all looked very healthy. You could tell they all looked like they were feeling about normal for the landing and recovery phase, where their body's trying to readapt. So, yeah, I haven't heard any reports of anything other than that they're doing well. So,
I saw a lot of smiling and waving.
yes, yes, yes.
Okay, our next question is from Ellen with thedailymail.com.
Hi, thank you guys so much for taking our questions tonight. This question is for Joel. Barry Wilmore's daughter spoke out on social media and blamed politics and negligence for her dad's delayed return. We know that President Trump and Elon Musk both said the previous administration didn't want to bring the Starliner crew back for political reasons. Can you comment on these claims?
Yeah, so I wasn't involved in any conversations with the previous administration. It was clear we had a request from the current administration, and the results you saw is what we saw today with the landing of Crew 9.
Okay, we'll take our next question here in the room.
Have you guys gotten a chance to talk with the families of Butch and Suni? And I mean, I'm sure just being able to see them wave and smile today is a huge relief for them, but they've been in quarantine and up in space for almost a year. How are they feeling with everything?
Yeah, I haven't talked personally to the families, but I know the astronauts have a great support system. In other words, they're able to effectively FaceTime with their family and keep in touch with their family. You know, I'm sure Butch is looking forward, and Suni both coming. Easter's coming up, and there's graduations coming up, and there's lots of family activities coming up that the timing's probably pretty good for. So I haven't had a chance to talk to the family, so.
My guess they had bigger smiles than the crew members.
Yes, yes.
Okay, our next question is from Mike with space.com.
Thank you, guys. This is probably for Sarah. I was just wondering, like, were there any different approaches that you guys took with this Dragon to kind of meet this faster deadline, or this, and if there were any kind of changes to the processing, like, are those things you can take into future missions?
Hey, no changes to the processing. And actually, if you're able to go back and listen to Friday night's briefing, I think Steve also shared a little more detail about that. But similar process, it's just a matter of doing a little bit of Tetris within our facilities of what vehicles are going into what tests or what operations in the pre-launch processing flow first. So we certainly did that. There's a few items of hardware within the vehicle that are unique to the specific crew flying. For example, we have small, medium, and large seat buckets installed in each of the 4 locations, and then custom foam for each individual to further customize their experience. And so there was a little bit of just doing the tally on the unique hardware and making sure it was all okay to be used for this mission, but nothing unique to the actual processing flow itself.
Okay, our next question is from Carolyn with Fortune Magazine.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. I'm wondering, can you just share a little more how Suni and Butch handled kind of the switch mentally to the 9-month mission, besides being very resilient, and what advice you give the rest of us lonely humans when we encounter challenging circumstances? And then maybe just talk a little more about the physical repercussions with respect to radiation, effects on the heart and cornea, that kind of thing, and how we go about planning to protect against that when we think about missions like to Mars and extended stays. Thanks.
I can start, and then the other guys could ask. You know, before an astronaut flies, we talk to the crew. The crew members are talked to about extending. Hey, you may be assigned for a 6-month mission or an 8-day mission in this case, and you may be extended. Frank Rubio was an example, right? Mark Vande Hei was an example. So this isn't the first time that people are flown. Clearly their mission was much shorter than those other missions, but the crew members are talked about, hey, what would you do if you had to be up there for a year? So they mentally prepare before they launch, and they talk to the other crew members that have flown for these long duration missions. And so the teams are preparing. We do different things on the ground. If you're there a little longer than normal, maybe you'll have some extra family conference times, or maybe a half day off after a certain amount of time on orbit. And so we had experience from past crew members, and we made changes in the operations and how we do that. And so let's see, Bill, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think the other question was, really on kind of the effects of space on people in general, and when you change the duration on them. We look at every crew member when they're going up and making sure that we feel confident, even if their mission had to be extended, that they're up for it and that they've got, I think, the time allowable, I think, for them to stay in space and to go through that. We monitor everything on board. We keep an eye on things like radiation. We keep an eye on things like solar activity that can affect that. We keep an eye on the rest of the environmental factors on board, whether it be the carbon dioxide levels, the CO2 levels, the contaminants that we have on board. We have scrubbers and filters and things that take that out. So we do all the things that we would normally do to manage that for crew and minimize their exposure to anything that could be considered harmful. And then we limit the times to the best of our ability that we can up there.
Our next question is from Marcia Smith with spacepolicyonline.com.
Thanks so much. Steve, you mentioned that Crew 11 might launch as early as July, which seems like a pretty short interval for Crew 10 to be up there. Could you talk about what's driving you to launch as early as July? And will either of the astronauts who are bumped from Crew 9 be on Crew 11, Stephanie Wilson or Zena Cardman? And which capsule will they be flying?
Let's see the timing for that mission right now. Originally we were going to fly that mission. We had been, if you look at historically, our rotations have been in February and August. There is a particular SpaceX cargo flight, CRS-33, that has the ability to do some reboost for the space station, and that needs to fly in that late August, early September timeframe. And so we moved our handover up. That boost trunk is what we call it, will be there for a large part of the fall timeframe. So to get all the propellant used on that mission. So that's why we looked at moving it up. Right now we think we'll fly probably the capsule 206, which is our fleet leader. It'll be on its 6th flight. We'll continue to work that with SpaceX. You have to remember with space station, one of the critical consumables is docking ports. We have 2 of those docking ports. And so once we fly that CRS-33 mission with the boost trunk, one of those docking ports will be tied up for an extended duration. And we like to do this direct handover. We like to ensure the new vehicle is there, the new crew's there, before we undock the astronauts that have been there for the increment in progress. And so when you put all that together, it drove us to look at right now, mid to late July. Of course, things can change over time, but that's kind of what we're looking at. We'll kind of pivot over to that once we complete the debriefs for Crew 10. So,
our next question is from Will Robinson Smith with Spaceflight Now.
Hi. Taking a question from us. Question to Steve Stitch. Going back to the comment you made earlier in this briefing, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that there was another look that needed to be taken at the flight suit for those flying Boeing Starliner. Can you add a little bit of detail into that may need to be changed and the reason for that? Thanks.
Did you get that?
I couldn't.
I'm sorry, you're coming in a little bit, it's breaking up a little bit. Can you please try to repeat your question? Operator, if you could please unmute the participant. Will, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Oh, perfect.
Nope.
I'm sorry, we keep losing you. If you could just follow up with us after this news conference, we'll be happy to get a response over to you from the panel up here. But for now, that'll do it for our press conference this evening. Once again, Crew 9 is safely back on Earth. And as always, you can follow NASA and all of our missions on nasa.gov. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.
Around here, it's not a patio, it's a patio.
Oh, I love those chairs.